The guy walked through a destroyed building, and a beam of magical energy trailed behind him. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared in front of him, similar to a gorilla and a bear, with huge horns and human ears. The monster opened its mouth, growled, its eyes glowed red, and saliva flew from its mouth in all directions. At this time, many blue portals appeared in the sky outside, connected by one beam. The guy just said that he was in charge. After that, he fell to the floor, crouched down, touched the ground with his hand, and a magical pentagram began to appear under him. He began to cast a spell that would cover the earth in ice, and a huge snowflake appeared in his hand, capable of embracing everything. After putting everything into eternal sleep, he used the permafrost spell, and a huge snow woman appeared behind him. The monster felt all this power and began to growl, grabbing the floor. The woman blew towards the monster, and it immediately began to become covered in an icy crust. After that, the rays of the sun peered into the building, and everything began to gradually melt. The house of the magician was the most skilled family of magicians in Korea, and even within such a family of geniuses, the boy was considered an outstanding talent. That was until his father called him into his office. The boy was the third son of a prestigious house of magicians, and his name was Shin Hyul. He declared that he would achieve a result worthy of the name of their esteemed house, and would definitely graduate first in the list of students at the Obelisk Magic Academy. He will definitely become the greatest archmage in the world and lead the House of Magic to new heights. And his father said that his talent surpasses that of his brothers and no one can compare with him. There were high hopes for him. He was supposed to reach the pinnacle of the world of interactive magic and prove himself at the summit of magical arts. Shin Hyul just smiled and picked up his amulet. He promised to do a perfect job to become the greatest mage in the world, and vowed to surpass not only his brothers but even his father, the greatest mage in the country. 2 years later, he studied at the Obelisk Academy of Magic, a prestigious educational institution. The teacher said that the second-year students should get ready because they had a practical test today. He added that one boy named Bayek Se-hyuk should just work as usual and had nothing to worry about, to which the boy thought, who is worrying here? After all, the last seat was probably taken, and all eyes turned towards Shin Hyul. They said that he doesn't even understand the basics of magic, and it's unclear how he even moves from course to course. He was called a useless fool who was incapable of using interactive magic. Shin Hyul thought that modern magicians were a rather rare and valuable asset. At that moment, the teacher told Baek Se-hyuk that the practical test was starting and he should begin, and wolves appeared around him. The guy created a table in front of him, from which a fireball appeared, and the teacher said that everything was great, because he met the time limit for eliminating the monster. Modern magic has evolved greatly with the advent of artificial intelligence, and all modern magicians have chips implanted inside them that make it easier to cast even the most complex spells. But Shin Hyul couldn't master it, and the teacher said that now it was his turn to fight. First, he concentrated mana in his heart, the source of his magical powers. He then formed a magic circle going through 8 steps in succession. But before he could do this, wolves attacked him. Beck asked if he thought it was magic. He was called a relic of the past, an outdated mage who couldn't handle interactive magic, and a scumbag who should quit magic and know his place. This angered Shin Hyul, and now he was sitting on the floor, and there were no more monsters in front of him, because the time allotted for elimination had expired. They announced that he had failed, and everyone in the room laughed. The guy, all sweaty, clenched his hands and couldn't believe his latest failure. But at least it improved the conversion speed a little. The day he was declared a loser, his father gave up all hope for him. His father even sent him a pill that would destroy the magic circle in his heart. But the boy couldn't give up on his dream and chose the traditional method of casting spells. This method has not been used for a long time, but he decided to continue teaching, although its big disadvantage is that you can only learn from ancient books. Shin Hyul was in his room and didn't understand why all those old books couldn't be converted into electronic versions. Suddenly his attention was drawn to a strange book that he had no memory of buying. He opened the book, flipped through a couple of pages, and noticed that it was rather worn. It looked antique, but he couldn't understand what was written on it, because the handwriting was complicated. Suddenly he noticed the name Rabel Whitener, which he had not heard for a long time. The first greatest magician of humanity, Rabel Whitener, was the first emperor of the Magic Empire and the founder of Magic in Principle. When Shin was younger, he often saw this name on memorials. Suddenly, the pages of the book began to turn by themselves, and a bright light emanated from them. Shin covered his eyes with his hands, dropped the book, and couldn't understand what it was. When he removed his hands, he realized what kind of light it was. Suddenly, the book began to make a voice and said that whoever possessed the identical nature should hear this voice. He, Rabel Whitener, bequeaths this book to the boy. Shin Hyul was shocked that the book could talk. At that time, he didn't yet know that the fact that he was a scumbag was actually his great advantage. The teacher said that those who fail their practical test today will be sent to additional classes. The students were whispering about who had failed the exam, and someone said that everything was clear anyway. The same one who had not made friends with artificial intelligence. Shin Hyul, who had no choice but to suffer from his own helplessness, felt as if he had been reborn. The next day he came to the academy, to the dining room, where many people were sitting. The guy himself sat by the window and silently ate his breakfast. Another guy came up to him and asked why he was eating alone again. Shin was surprised to see him next to him again. The guy, without asking permission, sat down next to him and remarked that his food looked delicious. His name was Ji Sushan, and he was sitting next to me, happily eating rice. Despite his sloppy appearance, he was a fairly experienced sorcerer, ranked in the top 10 in the academy, who reached the third circle at the age of 18. Ji wanted to take the food from the guy, and since he wouldn't mind, he asked to give it to him, but Shin replied that he should only eat his own food. Only this guy could be called his friend in this worthless school life. Ji said that if he was being bothered, he just had to point his finger and the guy would take care of it. Shin replied that nothing had happened and said that he had found some strange book yesterday. This unusual book had all the pages blank after the third. It seemed to be Rabel's book, unless, of course, this was some kind of joke from the guys. When he opened it, light poured out from there and a kind voice was heard. And Ji was surprised that she was enchanted because it was impressive. Shin said the voice told him that it was an inheritance for someone like him, and someone who wasn't like him wouldn't even be able to open the book. Ji replied that it sounded intriguing and asked to try opening the book, but Shin said that the last page said to die on the way. It said that he should create a magic circle, not in his heart, but in his brain. Ji said that it was no longer funny because the magic circle in the brain was clearly an attempt to kill him. And together they went to the Obelisk Academy dormitory to look at the book. Shin handed it to the guy and said that it wouldn't open unless he looked like the owner of Rabel. Ji decided to check and tried with all his might. His hands were tense trying to open the book. Then he handed it back and said that it didn't give in at all, and maybe there was some kind of seal on it. He didn't know, but he gave in, told the guy to forget about all this nonsense, and decided to leave. After that, he left, slamming the door, leaving Shin alone. The guy returned to the book, opened it, and noticed that he was doing it easily. And suddenly he noticed new hieroglyphs and didn't understand whether this page hadn't been blank before. Rybel stood in the sky looking at his successor who, if he understood correctly, was attempting to use magic by creating magic circles with his heart. It was a natural way for the common man. Shin asked if the man meant to say that it was wrong. The book flew into the air and the guy was very surprised. The book said that if he accepts his will and is ready to become his disciple, he must first destroy the magic circle in his heart. And then he created a new one in his head, and several sparks flew straight into his head from the book. And after all this, he had to open this book again. Shin was panicking. This was getting too much for a joke, but the book kept insisting that he create a circle in his brain. Mana, the source of magic, is destructive to the brain. And if mana gets into the brain, it will lead to a breakdown of the psyche, and in the worst case, to irreversible brain death. No matter how you look at it, it looked like a demand to commit suicide. The guy went to bed and didn't understand who would sign up for something like this. The next day at the academy, the teacher asked Shin what was wrong. The boy handed the professor a book and asked him to look at it. The man picked up the book and immediately realized that it was an ancient manuscript. An aura of antiquity simply emanated from her. He asked the guy if he really wanted him to check it, and Shin asked him to try opening it first. After all, he wanted to know if it was sealed with magic or something else, because strange rumors had been circulating among the students lately. The professor said that thinking about rumors given his academic performance was not the best idea. He would look into it, but the guy had to promise to study harder. He touched the book, analyzed it, and said that there was no magic in it, and the boy should stop being interested in fairy tales and focus on his studies. Shin was shocked. He hoped for at least something, because neither Suchin nor even the professor could open this book. And then the possibility arose that everything was real. Already in the evening, he was sitting in his room, and there was a book lying on the floor in front of him. After that, he took out the bag of pills that his father had sent him. By swallowing them, he will say goodbye to his mana circle in his heart, because his father told him to forget about practice and at least become an outstanding theorist. One way or another, the guy was not going to give up magic. He took 2 pills in his hand and tried to stop his palms from shaking. He was already on the sidelines of life and immediately swallowed the pills. The guy sank to the floor in pain as the mana circle tied to his heart was destroyed. It was pain and the end for him as a magician, because there was no way back, and now he would cross the taboo by launching mana into his brain. The previous one will die so that a new magician can be born. As soon as the mana flowed into the convolutions of his brain, the old pain dulled, and the new one was so unbearable that it seemed like he was about to die. He wondered if this was death, but at that moment someone whispered in his ear. It was a voice created with mana, and the light, darkness, wind, and earth, the spirits of mana swirled and whispered to him, becoming one with him. He listened to the bright voices and laughter as if he had been blessed. And then Shin woke up on the floor in his room, and there was a book lying next to him. He stood up, looked at his hands, and did not believe that he was alive, and turning around he saw an open book. It was true, and now symbols were visible on the blank pages. He began to hear the voice more clearly, and he was congratulated because he had finally taken the first step. Shin realized that the book was called Idrid. From now on, the writings of his legend began through this book of Idrid. The voice bequeathed all its magic to him. He called the guy a successor from the future, but then said that he shouldn't address him that way. After all, Shin was now his student. A few days later, the boy was sitting in class and looking at the book, because he had found something new again. Who would have known that learning magic could be so exciting? Because Adrid contained only hidden knowledge. First, he learned that mana has a will of its own, and for most people, letting magic into their brains results in a clash of two consciousnesses. This leads to brain damage, which is why mana is considered harmful to it, but they were different. Their thinking blocked the will of mana, so they did not receive damage. Shin wondered if his brain was not subject to the will of mana, and therefore was resistant to the interactive magic that was embedded in the brain with chips. He continued reading the book, but they were interrupted by the professor. The professor asked the students if they remembered about the midterm testing for second years, and this time a new rule would be added. Shin was surprised when he heard this news. The professor said that from this year onwards, anyone who fails it will not be able to retake it, and will be immediately excluded. This new rule was proposed by the House of Mages. Everyone in the class immediately started whispering that the defective guy would finally leave. The professor looked to the side and said that it seemed like one of them was already on the edge. After a while, Shin was walking down the street, thinking that renting a simulation training facility in the city was too expensive. Here they charged 200,000 won an hour, and even that was hard to afford. He entered the room where a man greeted him. Shin said he wanted a room for an hour, and the man asked if he would be training alone. The man handed over a card and said that room 14 was waiting for him, and that the instructions for controlling the holograms were there. Shin took the map and said not to bother him because he knew everything. The man recognized this guy as someone who was from a house of magicians and a famous family, but was not compatible with interactive magic and thought he was out of luck. Shin stood in the room already dressed, and they announced that the simulation was starting, and he needed to crush the wolves. A multitude of galactic animals appeared around him, ready to attack. Although they were low-ranking monsters, 10 at once was quite a challenge. At the academy, the average elimination time for the wolf test was 12 minutes, 32 seconds, and the guy was going to test what was written in the book every day. There is no better way to evaluate your results in practice. The guy used the magic of the Circle of Infinity. A loop of water appeared around him, which repelled the monsters. Shin hadn't felt such strength for a long time and thought it was incredible. While the others used interactive magic with the help of magic circles on the heart, he used a magic circle in his brain, causing mana to circulate throughout his body. Thanks to the Circle of Infinity, the power dormant within it was released. The voice told him that he shouldn't be surprised by such things because he had a whole path ahead of him. The Infinity Circle was the very basis of the Waitner style of magic. The boy was able to cast spells the way he imagined them in his head. This was only the first circle of the Waitner style of magic, the call of the heart, just the beginning. Shin left the building after finishing training, and the man told him to come again. The man went into room 14 to clean up, thinking about how tired he was. He asked how the failed geniuses trained. He opened the table and saw that the guy had completed the test in 6 minutes and 37 seconds, which was a record at the international competition level. The man started kicking the piece of iron, wondering how such an incompetent guy could set such a record, and decided that the machine was malfunctioning. At this time, Shin happily returned home with his little book, because the beginning of the legend had been laid. Creating the Infinity Circle was a serious challenge for the guy. What was written in the book was different from all the basics he had studied before. The mana in his hands, feet, heart, and brain can be subjugated to his will. Shin didn't understand what this even meant, because how could one understand anything from such a vague description? It seems as if some thought is already close to understanding, but as soon as it is grasped, it dissipates. In the teachings of magic, it is said that there is a certain wall of enlightenment, when each magician encounters his limit of mana, as if crashing into an invisible wall, and this fact is relevant in all eras. For now, the guy should focus on pumping mana through his entire body, as the book says. Is this really all he has to do? When he came to, he realized that he had been pumping mana for 10 hours without a break, and in theory he should have been exhausted, but strangely enough, the guy did not feel tired at all. A joyful G met him near the academy. He asked Shin if something was wrong because he looked sleepy. Now the guy has to maintain the circulation of mana every day, but it is not easy, because he wants to adapt to this circle and effectively implement it as soon as possible. When he formed the second mana circle at the age of 12, he was called a genius, and his father began to have high hopes for him. Now the guy only had one circle of mana in his brain, and he didn't know how to move forward. For magical progress, overcoming the wall of enlightenment is essential. His father once told him one thing back when he had hopes for the guy. The ideal is nothing but shackles. It is an illusion created by human arrogance. The ideal is a lie. Shin, sitting on his bed in the lotus position, was completely immersed in meditation, focusing on the feeling of magic within himself. He could clearly feel the mana flowing through his hands and fingers, as if soft currents of energy were responding to his desire. In the heart and head, the energy flowed as he commanded, and the key to this was imperfection, freedom, and boundless imagination. He allowed himself to create spells without complex formulas of interactive magic, which significantly reduced the time it took to prepare spells. However, the spells produced had a uniform and easily recognizable pattern, limiting variability. In contrast, Weitner's method was unbridled, free, like human thought itself at the moment of inspiration. Now the guy could easily and effortlessly change the shape of magic, as if he were molding it from flexible matter of energy. It was magic, devoid of algorithms and formulas, but even on the first lap it greatly depleted his physical endurance. However, the very possibility of using this type of magic was amazing and seemed something truly incredible. After he crosses the wall of enlightenment, he will reach the greatest heights. The professor entered Shin's room and told him to follow him because he had a guest. Shin put all his items aside and, very surprised, went out to the professor. The man explained that his father had come specifically to visit him and discuss important matters, so they headed to the meeting place. Together they walked to the reception room, where the father calmly told them to come in, showing confidence and willingness to talk to his son. The professor entered first and announced to those present that he had brought Hayul, causing a slight excitement and anticipation in the room. The guy stepped forward and with a slight smile admitted that he hadn't seen his father for a long time, and was glad to finally have the opportunity to meet him in person. The professor bowed and quietly left the room, leaving them alone for an important conversation which only increased the seriousness of the moment. The father, sitting next to his son on the sofa opposite, noted that he noticed how Shin did not refuse to attend classes despite all the difficulties. This meant that the boy did not accept the bitter pill that his father tried to slip on him in the form of strict demands and expectations. Shin replied that he was indeed continuing his studies because he had recently achieved significant success in magic and wanted to prove his strength. The man listened to his words in bewilderment and could not understand whether he was still chasing these seemingly empty and unattainable dreams. Shin Heil replied that this was indeed the case, and that he intended to become the greatest magician of the generation. These words surprised the man very much, and he was even more surprised by his son's determined look. But he sighed wearily and said that the guy had already lost a whole year. It's time for him to finally accept reality. It doesn't matter how hard he works, even if he achieves something in the future, as long as his body is not compatible with interactive magic. That's why he won't become a real magician. At least the guy still has an extraordinary talent, and he just needs to give up meaningless ideals and take up theory, which will be the best use of his gift. Shin interrupted him and said that everything was as he said last time, and his opinion did not change. He will never give up magic. Ordinary life does not appeal to him, much less draw him into it. What he wants is to lead the house of magic. Father said that becoming a great magician, or the head of the 8 magicians, is not something that can be achieved by just wishing for it. Shin smiled and said that he would prove it to him in action. The man did not understand what exactly he was going to prove, since he was moving from one course to another and was on the verge of being expelled, and could this really be his proof? The guy said that he would be in the top 10 at the next test, and if Shin fails, he will leave the academy and take up theory, as his father wishes. But if he succeeds, he wants his father to recognize him as a magician and provide him with the appropriate support. Father remarked that apparently his so-called successes had completely gone to his head. The man put on his coat and started walking towards the exit, saying that he hoped that this was not all just empty talk. A few days later, the professor said that the final format of the exam had been officially approved. Everyone started whispering whether there would be team battles, and someone said that they would prefer battles with monsters. The professor said that they would be in for one-on-one fights, in other words, a struggle between students. The test will last 3 days. Starting from the 16th round, official representatives of the Magic Tower will be invited as observers. They had to give it their all, and Shin knew it was time to show his worth. All the students were shocked when they heard about the duels, because even the Magic Towers will take part, and this game will be for high stakes. Shin thinks that the Academy is in a frenzy over the upcoming midterms, and since the Tower's representative is showing up, the guy will attract media attention. The Magic Tower is an international organization of magicians, created by a dozen of the best of them, whose power is comparable to the power of an entire country, and all the students of the Academy strive to join them. Baek Sahyuk approached Shin and called the guy defective. Baek Sahyuk irritates the guy, but is still one of the top second years. Baek said that he would be Shin's opponent in the first duel of the midterms. He asked if he already felt the taste of defeat. He has to be sure that Baek will set a record for the incident that happened 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the final of the competition for young talents took place. Then Baek lost to the guy dry and was known as a loser. Once it became clear that Shin was incompatible with interactive magic, the guy pestered him nonstop. Baek says that anyone who fails the midterm will be expelled, and suggests knocking out Shin so he doesn't witness his failure. He and his friends started laughing and told Shin to get ready to cry into his pillow, because this was his first opponent. Shin believes that such an opportunity should not be missed, because it is a great chance to show his skills in the midterms, and asked the guy why he should be afraid of him. He said that he would use it to its fullest extent, which surprised Baek Sahyuk greatly. All the students around were watching them and whispering. Baek started screaming that this defective guy really thought he could handle him. He said that Shin should not deceive himself, or he had completely misunderstood his place and had gone off the rails. Shin only noticed that 5 years ago Baek had also barked at him and failed miserably. Since then, he has learned nothing. The guy started laughing, assuming he was still upset about his previous defeat, and called Baek a loser. Baek Sahyuk couldn't stand it, went closer to the guy, grabbed him by the collar, and started insulting him. Shin said that apparently, living at the price of others does not allow him to change, and there will always be someone stronger who will trample him into the dirt. Geniuses remain geniuses, and he rubbed his amulet. Shin will leave an imprint on the guy's skin, so he needs to be prepared. After that, he just turned around and left. Baek began to shake and bite his nail in anger, considering the guy an arrogant bastard, and swore to burn him to the ground and turn him into ashes. The next day, news broke about the return of the genius Shin Hull, a fallen genius from a famous house of magic, and now everyone was discussing whether he would be rehabilitated or whether this would be his final fall. His name was splashed across the headlines, and Baek's family probably did their best to contact reporters and file complaints against the university. Knowing the guy, it was pretty obvious. These midterms are meant to show everyone that genius always pulls through. The more attention they pay to Shin, the better. Suddenly, the phone on his desk vibrated. Shin took the phone from his father and asked if he had seen the article yet. When I heard that yes, he said to just ignore it. His father asked him if he had gotten into trouble himself, and he replied that yes, he had provoked Buck. This was done to attract public attention, but the father responded that agreeing to his conditions did not mean believing in his son. For the House of Magic, this didn't matter. The father admitted that he does not believe in the boy's victory, and these articles only disgrace their home, and he does not understand why all this is necessary and what drives him. Shin replied that people had already written him down as a magician, excommunicated from the house. And, of course, he apologized, but few people cared about the damage to the family. The father said that the damage may be minor, but that does not mean it does not exist. He reminded that wherever the boy went, the name of the House of Magic followed him. Shin agreed, but noted that these were empty worries compared to the benefits. The father could not understand what benefit his son's victory could bring to their house, because for him it seemed completely incomprehensible and meaningless. Hyun confidently said that the real benefit was that he was the greatest mage in the world who grew up and came from their powerful House of Magic. He set himself the goal of becoming the greatest magician not only in their family, but also to surpass everyone by the standards of the entire magical community to which they belonged. The father sat down in his chair, looked at his son, and said that his ambitions were as boundless and powerful as those of the ruler of a powerful magic tower. He added that regardless of what happens next, he has already made his choice, and his son expressed gratitude for this honesty and support. The father warned that if his son continued to dishonor the honor of their family and the House of Magic, he should be prepared for the most serious and unpleasant consequences. After that, the conversation was over. The father hung up, and the guy put the phone down on the table and thought for a moment about how high the stakes really were. He sat down on the bed, took a deep breath, and realized that the bets he had made meant serious changes, and now he had to prove his strength and determination. The long-awaited day of midterm exams arrived, and all the students gathered in a large arena, filled with a tense atmosphere of anticipation and excitement. The guy was standing on stage, warming up, trying to concentrate, when Beck approached him, clearly in a confrontational mood and ready to fight. Beck asked how the guy perceived the article and all that popularity, because from the first day, the fame of the unforgettable hero soared almost to the skies. He stated that Shin couldn't even cast spells properly, but nevertheless continued to disgrace himself and cause laughter and ridicule from everyone around him. Shin smiled back and said that the only one who would be disgraced here was Beck himself, who had begun to consider himself a winner too early. He thanked his opponent because he himself obediently crawled into his trap, not even suspecting that this would play against him. He noted that Beck didn't like him, but it was the least he could do for him, and he would quickly beat the opponent, only he shouldn't whine afterwards. Shin said that the first circle spells would be enough for him to defeat him. Beck started to get angry and say that the guy was playing the fool and dared to open his mouth at him. The judge immediately blew his whistle and announced the first round of midterm exams for the second years. He ordered the battle to begin. Beck began to cast spells and wished death on his opponent. A hologram appeared in front of him from which a fireball flew out. It reached Shin's face, but he only ducked slightly and dodged. The chip on Beck's neck began to make strange sounds and emit energy. The guy used a third circle spell called Explosion. Immediately from Shin's side, there was a huge explosion and dark smoke began to pour out. Buck laughed, saying that there was no need to pretend to be all-powerful. He was surprised when he noticed that the guy was okay and did not understand how it was possible that he was unharmed. After that, he used 3 holograms from which 3 fireballs flew out. Shin remained completely calm, not even thinking about panicking, and confidently began to weave a spell related to the element of water. A huge wave, like a wall, rose up in front of him, which in an instant stopped the fireballs flying at him. Beck was in great shock, as this was his favorite and, as he believed, invincible battle spell. However, Shin easily repelled the attack, and streams of water swirled in the air around him like loyal guards. The man who was watching the incident closely was completely confused and could not understand what exactly had happened. After all, this was only first circle magic, and he was able to use it in a matter of seconds. The girl next to him said she wondered why the man would put off his business at the Blue Tower just to watch the midterms. She wondered if he knew anything about this magic of Hyol. The man said no, he just saw an article about the boy, and curiosity about the return of the genius brought him here. The girl asked if it was just a coincidence. But even so, if the world knew that the Lord of the Blue Magic Tower, an 8th Circle mage, had come to watch the student fights, it would cause a lot of gossip. He himself knew this well because he was the ruler of the Blue Magic Tower, the 8th Circle magician Kim Kanen. That's why he asked for a VIP room. Suddenly someone walked up to them and the man turned around. He greeted the guest and was surprised that he also came. At this time, Shin stood unharmed, and steam was rising around him. Beck didn't understand how it was possible to block his 3rd circle magic explosion so easily with just 1st circle magic. Moreover, the speed of the enemy and his incarnations was abnormally high. Shin asked the guy if he was really that interested in how he was able to do all this so quickly. Buck shouted at him to be quiet and told him that he must die in silence. He immediately activated 3 tables, from which explosive balls flew out. The fireballs hit Shin, causing a massive explosion that spread across the arena, sending up clouds of smoke and dust. Back confidently stated that from the very moment Shin fell silent about the 1st circle, he understood that his enemy was very pathetic and weak. But Shin, without showing any effort, stopped the attack with one hand and remained completely unharmed, which caused surprise among everyone present. After that, he summoned a magical beam that powerfully flew towards the enemy, directing all the power of his spell. The beam flew past Beksaya, but to everyone's surprise, it did not hit him or cause any damage. The boy was amazed and surprised at how Shin was able to create such a spear out of wind, and did it so quickly, as if it was a normal thing. Back's attack did not harm Shin at all, and he remained unharmed, as if protected by an invincible shield. Beck, overcome with anger, cursed his opponent because he was actually going to win using only 1st circle spells. Shin created another spear, confidently stating that everything was as he said and was ready to continue the fight. This weapon flew towards the enemy, but he managed to put up a protective table in time, which partially covered it. Bak couldn't understand why Shin had suddenly become bolder, and assumed that he had learned to cast spells a little faster than before. He still thought that Shin was just as defective, but at that moment, a spear flew very close, causing him to become wary. The spear hit the boy's shoulder and he instantly grabbed it, feeling pain and irritation. He didn't notice when the spear moved behind him, as if by magic. Kim Kon-yoon and the woman standing next to him watched the whole thing, closely following the progress of the fight. Shin began to cast wind magic and challenged his enemy if he still didn't understand what was happening around him. It seemed to him that the time had come to show his strength once again and demonstrate his true power. After this, Shin created a huge bird from the air currents, shining with magical light. The bird spread its wings and rushed towards the enemy with incredible speed. Beck couldn't believe that he had a real wind spear in front of him, because it seemed to have split in two. Shin calmly replied that it was true and that it was impossible to do so under normal conditions. But he added that he was capable of doing this, and now the enemy would have to block 4 birds. Baek Sayuk clicked his tongue in irritation and immediately erected a magical barrier in front of himself. 3 birds did not manage to reach their target and crashed hard into the protective barrier. He thought that these were just first circle spells that he could still block. But before he had time to come to his senses, the 4th wind bird crashed into his back. Beck realized that one of the copies had suddenly changed course. Shin noted that it is useful to think about details, but it is unacceptable to be distracted in battle. He began to conjure even more birds, as if he had just begun a real attack. Beck decided that he needed to first get out of range of his copies and keep his distance. He was sure that the enemy's range of destruction was still limited. So it's enough to keep your distance, and then these attacks won't affect him. Shin said that this conclusion was not bad, but it would still not be enough. He folded his palms in a special way, and magical energy shone between them. A giant bird made of pure wind unfurled in the sky. Kim Kong-hyun watched and was amazed at how quickly the boy activated magic. He was also surprised by the fact that he combined spells, changing their trajectory right in flight. After that, he asked Mr. Shin In-hyuk for his opinion. After all, he was the head of a revered family of magicians and a wizard of the 8th circle. The girl confirmed that Hyul's magic violates all the rules of the original spell code. The code specifies a return radius of 37.44 meters and a speed of 116 kilometers per hour. Also, the trajectory is allowed to be changed only once per activation. For example, if the target is further than 38 meters, the spell will not reach it, and the trajectory is fixed. In other words, only those spells that obey the source code work, so duels are battles of wits. When using spells that have been thoroughly studied, one can only guess the enemy's actions. In such a situation, the ability to react instantly becomes a key factor. It looks like skills from computer games, but Waitner's style of magic completely ignores these principles. Beck was struck down by the huge bird and couldn't believe he was losing to simple first circle magic. Shin asked if he had underestimated the power of the first circle, since the 3rd was useless here. After all, you can kill even with the most ordinary pen if you know how. Shin began to cast strange magic in his hand, and Beck immediately recognized it. It turned out to be the magic of the first circle. Water magic. You don't need any incredible spells to kill. The water turned into a dense sphere and closed around the opponent's head. Usually, the Academy's combat uniform activates a magical barrier, a safety zone. But now this barrier was as useless as ever, just like Buck himself, lying on the floor, gasping for breath and tearing water from his face. All the spectators in the arena, including the judge, silently watched what was happening. Shin turned to the instructor, noting that the outcome of the fight was obvious, or he could continue. The referee simply blew his whistle and gestured to the side. The match is over and Shin Hyul is the winner. Exhausted and barely alive, Buck was carried out of the arena. Shin also left the arena, looking at his hand as if remembering something. He felt like he had found himself as a magician again, and he liked the feeling. Kim Kang-yoon walked along the corridor of the academy with his assistant. He had asked earlier if this was a manifestation of supernova magic. His eyes were shining because this spectacle seemed incredibly intriguing to him. He wanted to know as much as possible about Shin Hyul. At this time, Ji burst into Shin's room, having heard rumors of his victory. What grueling training did he do in secret? That behind his back now magic of simply incredible power and beauty is happening. Those wind spears looked truly amazing, and the spell combo unfolded so quickly that it was breathtaking. Shin asked the guy if he really wanted to know how he did it, and Ji confidently replied that of course he did. The guy just smiled and said that it was magic, his big secret. Hyul asked her friend if he had managed to see the latest news that was currently being actively discussed. An interview with him immediately after the match was recently released, and Ji was incredibly curious to learn more about his unusual magic. Then he was asked what was this incredibly fast activation of magic that the guy showed at the competition. He was asked how he was able to activate the magic so quickly and change the trajectory of the wind spear as if it was a combo. Kim Kun-yoon approached them and, having received their consent, said that he was ready to answer the question posed. He introduced himself as a wizard of the 8th Circle from the Blue Magic Tower, and mentioned that he had recently watched Hyol's match. In his opinion, the guy used a special memorization magic that belongs to the 4th Circle. When those present did not understand what he was talking about, the man demonstrated this, and a flame ignited in his hand. This spell allows one to instantly activate a spell whose structure is memorized, which explains its speed. He was asked why then not everyone uses such great magic, and Canon explained that it only works on spells 3 circles below the current level of the magician. He asked Hyul if he had stated everything correctly, and the boy confirmed that it was so. He spent a long time choosing his words so as not to use an expression in the style of Waitner, and found a formulation that fit perfectly. The man with the microphone asked if this meant that the guy had already reached the 4th circle of magic, since he could use memorization. Canon confidently replied that of course this was so, because it was already obvious. At that very moment, camera shutters clicked and flashbulbs went off on all sides. The news of this became a sensation, because reaching the 4th circle at such a young age is a record comparable to the achievements of the ruler of the Magic Tower. G asked his friend if this meant that he was now a 4th circle mage, but decided that it was better to change the subject now. One of the journalists asked how he would explain the bypass of the source code of the spells. Kim Kong-yoon became visibly nervous and tried to think of what to say to this. Shin said that he would explain everything himself, because in fact, the rules of the source code of magic are quite simple. The whole point is that you can change the spell formula itself, making your own adjustments to it. Canon objected that this was impossible in practice. Compared to trying to attach wings to a card just to make it fly, this is certainly not something that can be done easily or without significant effort. If the guy had not been compatible with artificial intelligence, it is unknown what his future would have been. Shin began to demonstrate modified magic, and bright magical butterflies appeared around him. He called this technique a special modified version of magic. Kanan watched this incredible spectacle with admiration. He realized that he had witnessed a revolution, because from that day on, the magical world would change forever. Upon hearing about such magic, Ji asked his friend if he really expected him to believe in it. He asked whether he would have believed it in his place, but he was still sincerely happy about Shin's victory. After that, he said that it was time for him to return to the hostel. He needed to prepare well for tomorrow's fight with a serious opponent. Shin was surprised by these words, but chose not to answer. The next day, everyone gathered again at the Obelisk Academy arena. Ji sat on the floor, keeping his distance from his opponent. Shin watched the fight and realized that the girl was the very difficult opponent his friend had spoken of. Adela Stewart cast the Moon Bullet spell. The Stewart family is a French family of divine guardians of Korea, a legendary genius born from the union of 2 great magical dynasties. Daewoo's magic was truly unique and unrepeatable. The divine guardians have modified their magic to include a powerful lunar attribute. When the girl began to cast a spell, Sukin created a magical shield in front of him. However, Adela fired several arrows at him, which destroyed the protective barrier. The referee blew his whistle, raised his hand, and announced the end of the match. The girl let her hair down from its ponytail because she had won this fight. Adela Stewart. The combination of light and dark attributes gives the divine guardian race a glow similar to the moon. This magic has its own range, power, and characteristics that are not found in the source code bases. It is no wonder that she is extremely difficult to fight. Suddenly, Shin noticed that she was looking straight at him. He couldn't believe if she had just looked at him, or if it was just his imagination. Ji looked very tired, but his friend praised him for his worthy performance. Of all the possible opponents, he got Adela, and it was a real failure. Ji asked his friend if he had won his second fight, and he replied in the affirmative. This meant that his next opponent was Adela, and at that moment the girl came up to him and praised him for a great fight. Ji thanked her sheepishly and added that he had learned a lot from the fight. Adela asked Hyol if he had really become a real wizard. She admitted that she entered the academy in the hope that he would help her regain her lost memories. Adela and Hyul knew each other even before entering the Academy of Magicians, because their houses had a strong connection with the House of Divine Battles. The guy often crossed paths with Adela at events, and their relationship can be described in one word: rivals. Adela gave up her studies in France to join Obelisk and defeat him. After he proved unsuitable for interactive magic, the girl never spoke to him again. He was branded as trash, and she lost her long-awaited rival. Shin admitted that he was not yet able to compete with her. Adela left, saying that everything would be decided in battle. Ji put his hand on his friend's shoulder and asked if everything would be okay. When the guy replied that he didn't understand the question, Ji was in complete shock. His next opponent was Adela Stewart herself. Shin Hyul was stunned when he heard this. Everyone gathered in the arena because the battle between Adela and Kayul was coming. The girl calmly waited for the battle to begin and, having warmed up, was ready for the fight. Everyone was surprised why the guy hadn't shown up yet. Was he scared? There was a lot of talk about him in interviews, but he was just making a big show of himself and had no chance against Adela. The referee looked at her watch and, according to the rules, declared Adela Stewart the winner. At that moment, Shin ran in, adjusting his jacket, all in sweat, and asked to stop. He smiled and apologized for being late. The judge was amazed that he had finally appeared and asked where he had been, but there was no time for explanations. He decided to punish him for being late by depriving him of a break. The judge ordered everyone to take their positions. Adela asked if she could ask the reason for his lateness. Shin closed his eyes and said that nothing special had happened. A loop of water formed around him as he prepared for battle. He admitted that the girl was strong and he needed to prepare for the fight. He promised that the fight would be interesting, but she doubted that anything could change in a day. She felt that the Hyul standing in front of her now was different from the one from yesterday. She hoped to see his true gift. Shin extended his hand forward and warned that it was better to give it his all right away. The referee announced the start of the match. The girl created a sphere above herself that looked like the moon. She then formed her hands into a pistol shape and cast the flame revolver spell. The sphere on her fingers flared and shone with a bright light. 3 magic circles appeared in front of her, from which fiery rays burst forth. Shin raised his hand up and focused his energy, using wind magic to prepare to repel the attack. A strong but small hurricane instantly dispersed the enemy's approaching fire spheres. After that, Adela immediately used her spell called Earth Needles. The ground beneath Kayul's feet cracked, and sharp stone spikes quickly burst out of the cracks. Shin reacted instantly and, tensing every muscle, jumped back to avoid the attack. The girl noticed that while he was in the air, he would not be able to completely dodge her blow. She assumed a cross-fighting stance and channeled her powers into an airstrike spell. Hyul understood that this was a special attack designed for enemies in the airstream. Most magicians believed that it was almost impossible to avoid such a spell. But Shin turned out to be more cunning and managed to create a magical barrier right under his feet while in the air. Spectators were amazed to see how he was able to erect a defense in the air during the fight. Adela, having witnessed this, could not believe her own eyes at such a reception. He used the reversible barrier as a solid support to maintain his position. Hyul once again proved that he has incredible magical instincts and tactical thinking. The secret attribute of the House of Divine Guardians is the moon, and to defeat it, you must give everything. To achieve this, he even decided to use the power of the sun itself in the fight. Adela's eyes were momentarily blinded by the bright rays of the sun. She realized that he was preparing an attack using this light. Now he was above her, and she could only defend herself. She used the magic Great Cage, and a barrier appeared in front of her. Shin used wind magic, and a sword appeared in his hand. He flew closer to her and hit the barrier. It was a first circle spell used as a third circle defensive spell, and she acted cautiously. After that, the guy jumped back and the sword in his hands disappeared. Adela dropped her barrier and realized it was now her turn to act. But she noticed that she couldn't move because her leg was tied with concrete. She looked at this place in surprise. She immediately realized that it was a binding to the earth, but she did not know when he managed to impose it. This couldn't be because he used it as soon as he landed. He moved so quickly that she couldn't keep up with his movements. Shin wasted no time and began to cast a spell, and a shimmering beam began to swirl around him. He used a magic charge and numerous water beams gathered in his hand. Adela released a beam of fire from her hand and destroyed the concrete on her leg. At this time, Shin had already created 3 huge spheres around himself. These spheres turned into dolphins from the water and rushed towards the girl. Adela couldn't think of anything else to do but put a shield in front of herself. As soon as the dolphins reached the surface, they crashed into the shield and were covered in water. The girl thought that everything would be easier than she expected. She remembered the news saying that he had used 4th circle memorization magic. Memorization only allowed one to use spells 3 levels lower than the current one, and since Hyul was a 4th level mage, he only had access to the 1st level. He can't defeat Adela with just 1st circle spells. The girl didn't notice how a windbird landed next to her, almost hitting her. She didn't understand when the guy managed to activate this spell. Perhaps he hid this modified version of the air spear in her sun-blind spot. As a result, she received a small blow and screamed in severe pain. Her hair came loose and she fell to the ground in front of him. Shin said that it was a long time ago and that she had probably already forgotten who she was fighting. Adela lay on the floor and looked angrily at her opponent. At this time, Cannon's assistant said that the guy's fighting instincts exceeded all expectations. He used a delayed attack, dodged, and applied ground binding at the same time, possibly planning it all from the start. He dodged the blow in midair, forcing Adela to attack. He then used the barrier as a support to gain height, standing with his back to the sun and making it difficult for the girl to see. At this moment, he instantly activated the long-term activation spell through memorization and created a wind spear. Immediately after the descent, he used the air to focus Adela's attention. In doing so, he created a tether to the ground, pretending that he was simply landing. And while the girl was turning away from the sun, a pre-calibrated spear of wind struck her back. The nickname First Circle Master Mage that was given to him just a couple of days ago now had meaning. His father sat in his chair and didn't understand what was wrong with it. The arena was slightly damaged and the two opponents stood looking at each other. Shin and Hyuk noted that despite the advantage, the guy was unable to deliver the decisive blow. That is, he cannot complete the task. Moreover, Adela hasn't even used her main trump card yet. The girl admitted that it was impressive and said that it even reminded her of a bummer. She decided that from now on she would fight with all seriousness. Shin assumed a fighting stance, glad that things had finally reached this point. The moon attribute is a special magic of the greatest house of divine guardians called Halo. A huge magic circle with the phases of the moon appeared above the girl, and the ground beneath her feet began to crumble, creating a dangerous crack. Shin covered her face with her bent elbow to avoid being blinded by the bright light. Another magic circle appeared in the sky from which a beam emanated, falling directly on the girl. Shin and Hyuk stood up from his chair and slowly walked towards the exit of the hall. Kim Kun-yoon asked him why he was already leaving the fight. The man replied that the battle was over and there was nothing more to see. But suddenly everyone heard a strange sound and turned towards the arena. The girl held a tablet in her hands and said in surprise that this couldn't be. Jisoo-chan, who was sitting nearby and watching the fight, was suddenly stunned. Adela suddenly stopped casting her spell and exclaimed that everything that was happening was unthinkable. A magic circle with a pentagram and fire symbols appeared behind the guy. He folded his hands and a hot ball of the flame volcano spell appeared in them. Adela immediately realized that this was second circle magic and was very surprised. After all, the guy had previously claimed that he was late because he was preparing for the fight. Adela noted that memorization only allows one to use the first circle of magic. She wondered if he had somehow reached the fifth circle. Shin just smiled silently with a mischievous expression on his face. The night before, he was in the Obelisk student dormitory. He sat on the bed in the lotus position and looked at the book lying in front of him. Adela was not an opponent that could be defeated with only first circle magic. Even Shin's own fighting style was no match for her magic. He opened the book and admitted to himself that he planned to fight when he became stronger. Something mysterious and promising had opened up on Adred's new page, which, if successfully applied, could turn out to be truly wonderful. The text spoke of the need to infuse mana into a special magical formula that could awaken hidden powers. This mysterious formula, according to the author, could open up new, previously unseen facets of reality itself. The guy became incredibly curious about what kind of effect such an unusual spell could produce. He decided it was time to cast aside his doubts and fears and, concentrating, began to pronounce the magic words. After these words, he stretched out his hand and touched the open page of the ancient book with his palm. A complex pentagram slowly appeared on the yellowed page, and the boy's heart filled with delight. However, soon a blinding glow spread, so bright that he was forced to close his eyes tightly. Just a couple of seconds later, the beam in the book intensified and pieces of pages flew out of it. The guy opened his eyes and was amazed to find himself in a place with many bookshelves. Shin Hayo looked around and couldn't figure out where he was. Suddenly, someone told him that he had arrived at the page of the first test. In front of him stood a girl in an unusual outfit named Alpha, the guide of the first test page. This was the first test hidden inside the Idred. Shin immediately realized that he was inside the book. It was not a simple movement, but a spatial dimension inside the book. He smiled and noted to himself that all this was incredible. The girl explained that this test would test his intentions as a successor. She extended her hands forward and added that the details would be revealed at the start. If he successfully passes the test, pages 18 through 31 will open, containing the magic of the second circle. To advance to the next circle of magic, he must pass this test. Alpha asked if he wanted to begin the mission, and Shin, without hesitation, stated that he wanted to begin immediately. Alpha bowed and made it clear that she understood everything. Then she began to dissolve into thin air and said that the test was beginning. The girl closed her eyes and a multitude of bright petals appeared around her. She appears to be human, but she is a magical entity, who would have thought. Suddenly, a strange voice appears and says that he will explain the details of the test. Shin immediately realizes that this is the voice of his teacher. The gem before it is called Elemental and contains an indefinite number of natural elements, chaotically mixed. The guy's task is to establish the final order of mana in the stone. Shin was surprised and couldn't understand what this meant. Wild elemental stones are a delicate material and their mana must be handled with extreme caution. There are only 4 types within it, and their mixing creates chaos. How can he organize it? In essence, it is like a mixture of grains of sand, salt, sugar, and pepper, which somehow need to be separated. This is no joke, and only a skilled master of the mind technique can cope with it. But what is happening seems incredibly intriguing to him, and so he decides that he is ready to take a risk and try his hand. Concentrating and using the mind technique, he feels a blazing fire of determination flare up in his eyes. A scattering of bright sparks is born right in front of him, and soft blue rays of magic begin to flow through the air. Magical waves emanate from the crystal, transforming into an infinity shape and intertwining. Shin tenses up even more and tries to concentrate. Suddenly, the stone in his hands becomes even bigger and flies off to the side. The force is so great that Shin can't withstand it and is pushed towards the cabinets. He falls to the floor and one book lands on his head, because any extra fluctuation of mana creates a high wave, and you have to act carefully. Shin tried to separate the mana, but it was so mixed there that it was difficult to separate. However, he has a great idea, and he will try no matter how long it takes. Having completely forgotten about time, the guy tried again and again to organize the flows. The slightest mental lapse forced me to start all over again every time. Then he finally managed to do it and divided the elemental stone mana. The teacher's voice congratulated him and said that he had passed the test. Now that he has mastered the technique of the mind, the second circle, the circle of resonance, will open up to him, and new recordings of Adrid will also become available to him. A few seconds later, the guy wakes up in his bed. He remembers everything that happened and realizes that he is back. First of all, he opens the book and rejoices, because he will finally form the second magic circle. Before the competition begins, he will finally learn his spell. Adela does not lose hope and uses the magic halo. The guy stands motionless in a fighting stance, and beams of magic fly around him, and the ground beneath him collapses. The girl creates magic circles above him, from which huge beams come out and crash right into the area where Shin is standing, and the ground there breaks and stones fly. Ji watches all this and worries, because it seems that this is the limit for Hayo. The girl casually brushes her hair back and says that the match is over. But how was he able to advance so much in such a short period of time? Who is this guy really? Although that's all, the Guinness she was chasing is no more. Adela is already turning around and leaving when she suddenly hears a strange sound. She turns around in surprise and doesn't understand what it was. Shin activates the second circle, resonance activation. He uses the magic dark blindness, and two spheres of different colors appear in his hands. This is the fusion of two circles of infinity. From the magic circle behind him, two magical hands emerge. With the power of free will, the boy asks them to become his arms and legs. Kanyun and In-hyuk watch this with surprise and are in complete shock. Adela is also trying to understand what is happening. The very same rays that the girl created are easily pushed apart by huge hands. Shin uses the magic Fire Volcano and directs it towards the enemy. Adela reacts instantly and tries to cast a protective spell, but the guy is faster and uses Resonance version 1, causing a huge weapon to appear in the air. The girl understands that she is unable to block it. She starts casting spells again and is happy that the guy is back and will be her target again. The huge weapon charges and shoots fire bullets. The judge stands to the side and covers his face with his hands in complete shock to keep dust from getting into his mouth. The girl stands for a while and then, exhausted, falls onto the broken floor. Shin also can't stand it, as he has spent a lot of energy, and falls to his knees tired. The referee declares the fight over and Shin Hyul is the winner. In-hyuk takes another step to leave, and Kongjin immediately notices his movement. The man calmly says that he is obliged to fulfill his promised obligations. Cannon replies that he understands everything, and a light, understanding smile appears on his face. He really is a man of his word. Everything turned out exactly as he expected. Shin Hyul goes out into the hall, changes his clothes, and realizes that he is very exhausted. The resonance of the second circle of infinity synchronized with the first circle in his head and strengthened his magic. Moon Attribute Magic is a hybrid that combines the range of light magic and the power of dark magic. In other words, if you pour dark magic into it, breaking the proportions, the range of destruction will be greatly reduced. However, with more advanced dark magic, the guy was unable to cope with the halo. Moon magic is a secret technique of the Divine Guardian House and cannot be learned easily. But just by glancing at the magic formula back then, the guy managed it thanks to his perfect mana control. The resonance circle allowed him to decipher the magic formula with incredible precision, deciphering the very structure of the spell, and he was only able to obtain such control over mana by disassembling the elemental stone. Without all this, he would only have dreamed of defeating Adela, and the guy sits, looking away in surprise. Suddenly, Kim Kong-yoon approaches him from the side. Shin looks at him with surprised eyes and realizes that this is the Lord of the Tower. The man says that he came to talk specifically to him, and now they were sitting together opposite each other in Kim Kung-yoon's office. The man apologized for disturbing Shin because he was probably tired, and he was watching the match, and it was just an incredible fight. Shin Hyul thanked him almost emotionlessly. Cannon looked at the girl and said that he would get straight to the point. He asked if Shin had reached the 5th circle yet. Come to think of it, the guy used a 2nd circle spell in battle, and their Lord of the Blue Magic Tower believes that he uses memorization. That is, since he used a 2nd circle spell, it turns out that Shin is at least a 5th circle mage. It was no surprise that Kanyeon came with questions, but Shin replied that no, he had not reached the 5th circle. Cannon replies that he knew, but asks how the boy was able to use the 2nd circle spell then. Shin asked if he said he used a spell modification. Would the man believe him? Cannon ponders his words and realizes that he is probably talking about the modification he talked about in the interview. Shin confirms everything, saying that yes, this is another modification. No matter how you look at it, reaching the 5th circle at 18 years old is simply impossible, and it would become a worldwide sensation. And if you have to use the 3rd circle in front of everyone, then everything will become even more difficult. They decide to keep it a secret for now, and the man says that modifications are great, but what does that have to do with 2nd circle magic? Shin said he had improved the memorization itself. Cannon was shocked by these words and asked if it was true. He stood up and laughed, because that meant it was possible, and in his opinion, that was amazing. The man is impressed because who would have thought that the shortcomings of these charms can actually be overcome? Shin suddenly notices the man's red eyes. He looks at them with great fear and cannot move. Cannon smiles and removes her hand from the guy's shoulder. He says that inside him there really is no magical mana formation characteristic of the 5th circle. It seems, as he said, the guy did not reach the 5th circle, so he'll go away now and explain everything to the reporters. He says that his red eyes will serve as proof, and the guy thanks him and wishes him a safe journey home. He bows to him in farewell, but the man is already leaving. Who would have known that the red eyes of the Tower Lord would be used to confirm his words? The red eyes of the Blue Magic Tower's ruler are able to see through the essence of mana itself with their special eyes. These are the best magic detectors in the world, but the guy apparently passed them since the Tower Lord didn't say anything. Waitner's magical style is a top secret, and he cannot reveal it to the world. In the next match, a couple of days later, Shin Hyul won again. As the boy was leaving, Adela stopped him. Shin said he thought she would be unconscious for another 4 hours, but was surprised she was already on her feet. He asked what she wanted, and the girl said that if he didn't mind, she would like to discuss the fight in detail. But she noted that it was better not to do this now because the final was still ahead, and if he was tired, then it could be later. Shin replied that everything was fine and they could discuss it now. A debriefing of the fight wouldn't hurt him either, and they went together to the waiting room. There is a lot to learn from analyzing this match and using strategy in it. Adela thought that she wanted to be like him someday. At this time, the girl in her room was looking at the huge screen on which Shin Hyul was. She immediately recognized him and thought that everything was already over with him. She was in the subsidiary office of the Magic Tower and was angry. The girl told her older brother that she thought the outcome of the battle was already decided. She asked him if this Hyul would really get away with it, since she herself was the eldest daughter of the Shin Sea House of Magicians. Shin Ji-han asked her what exactly she wanted him to do. Seiya asked what would happen if he returned to the house because the guy remembered very well the atmosphere that reigned there just a year ago. She admitted that she could no longer bear such treatment, and her brother calmed her down and asked her not to worry. He said that maybe a year ago Hyul was considered a genius, but now he can barely handle the 2nd circle of magic, and in a fight that's nothing. He asked his sister if she had seen his matches yet, but the girl reminded that there was a stir around him again. Jihan put his arm around his sister's shoulder and told her to listen carefully. His opponents at the tournament were the most ordinary students, and the 2 who reached the 3rd circle, and even in a fight with a 4th circle newcomer, the guy could easily cope. However, Hyul has a critical flaw. He is not suitable for interactive magic, and even if he found a way to compensate for this or used ancient magical techniques, his level is still inferior to the average 4th circle mage. C realized that this was exactly what she had been thinking. No matter how hard the guy tried, all he could do was flounder in the mud. She began to nervously bite her nail, saying what would happen if somehow Hyul began to threaten her position as the heir to the family. Jihan used magic to break the mug in his hands and said that then they would deal with him. Evening came and everyone gathered in the arena again. Suddenly, the losing guy fell to the ground with a loud thud. The referee blew his whistle, raised his hand, and announced that the match was over. The winner of the midterm examination competition was Shin Hyul. All the spectators were happy and shouting that this day had finally come. They said it was cool and that the magician's house was the best. They acknowledged that artificial intelligence could only be surpassed in ancient magic, and Hyul was truly a genius. Jisuchin ran towards the guy, loudly declaring that Hyul really was the best. He took him by the shoulders and said that now everyone would recognize his skills. But others present watching the guy said that without his ancient tricks he was nothing. The professor approached Hyul and congratulated him, saying that as a class teacher he was proud of him. Ji suggested throwing a small party to celebrate the student's achievement, and the teacher replied that he didn't have to say anything, because he wanted to reward the boy himself. A large crowd had gathered around Hyul because Suchin was shouting that everyone should get together and go celebrate. Hyul interrupted him and said that he would like to go, but he had one very important meeting. Ji was very surprised because how would they celebrate the holiday without the hero of the occasion? Shin Hyul waved goodbye to him, apologized, and said that it was really important. He ran away, apologizing again, and the professor encouraged the guy by patting him on the shoulder. For Hyul, this meeting was too important to miss. The guy went outside and ran up to the car, next to which stood a man who said he was waiting for him. The man opened the door for him and said that the head of the family was waiting for him, and he would escort the guy to the mansion. Together, closer to night, they reached a huge and beautiful building. Shin Hyul stood in front of the main doors and thought that a whole year had already passed. Then he was declared a scumbag and rebelled against his heartless father. He entered the academy and lived in a dormitory all this time, because he was forbidden to enter the family mansion. Now he entered the main corridor and realized that nothing had changed here. His gaze fell on the other doors, behind which was his father's office. He remembered In-hyuk's eyes burning with contempt and hatred. Shin Hyul has finally returned after a long absence. After waiting for a few seconds, he knocked on the door 3 times. Behind the door, a man in a black suit sat at a table, looking at documents, and told the guy to go through. The door creaked and Hyul saw a familiar room. The guy bowed and noted that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The father still indifferently told the boy to sit down. When his son sat down in front of him, he said that he had already come to terms with his failure. His speed of manifestation was extremely slow, and the formula would dissipate as soon as he lost concentration. What can we say about combinations of charms if he only showed himself to be a talentless and unsuitable candidate? But everyone recognized his outstanding talent, so his father wanted to direct him in a scientific direction. Of course, this time he didn't expect anything and thought it was just a cry of despair from a worthless loser. Shin Hyul replied that he understood everything. The father said that when he saw the article, he decided that it was a good opportunity, and that, faced with humiliation and another defeat, the boy would come to his senses. But the son completely destroyed his expectations and was able to overcome the lack of incompatibility. Moreover, he managed to go further and created his own unique modification of magic. The man smiled broadly and admitted that this round was definitely Hyul's victory. His prowess and skill in battle are well worthy of the title of a true and respected wizard. The guy, not hiding his emotions, jumped up from his chair and happily thanked his father. The man firmly stated that from now on their entire family would fully support him. The son can ask for whatever he needs for his studies, and all restrictions associated with the Shin mansion are lifted. As a rightful heir, the boy must use his powers for the glory of their family. Hyul's eyes lit up. A genuine smile appeared on his face, and he was truly happy. In-hyuk said there was one last warning. If the guy starts to slip again or stays in one place for a long time, then the man will personally destroy his magic circle. As expected from father, this pressure from an 8th circle sorcerer was truly terrifying. But this was his last chance. And so he agreed to this condition. In-hyuk replied that it was great and asked his son what his goal was. In the past, he seemed to want to lead the Shin family. Jihan, Sei, Min-hyuk, and Minji were still far behind their siblings. The guy replied that, as he said, he was not giving up his position as head of the family, and this was the final decision. First, he would force everyone here to acknowledge him, and his father asked how he would do that. Hyul put a piece of paper with writing on the table and said that the World Magic Olympiad would take place in 2 months. The most outstanding personalities from all over the world will gather and take part in it, and Hyul will bring her father a gold medal. The Magic Olympiad, open only to students under 20, is held every year and is a dream arena for those who want to attract the attention of the world. It is famous for its level, which is not inferior to competitions of adult wizards. Father said that at their level, the 100 countries' most outstanding achievement was the silver medal that the Blue Magic Tower's Lord once won. Hyul understood how impossible it was to fulfill his promise of a gold medal, since this was a World Olympics. But his father still asked. The guy replied that yes, so he would have a request. For 2 months, until the competition begins, he asked that his brothers and sisters not interfere with him. The desperate guy used a gold medal he might never get as a means to gain immediate protection. Inyuk would have refused under any other circumstances, but he smiled and said that it sounded tempting. The next day came, and the sky was clear and the birds were singing. Hayul was lying on the floor, with mountains of books around him, and he was sleeping. But as soon as the morning rays of the sun came through the window, he woke up. As soon as he returned from the family mansion, he began searching for the next challenge. Although the guy had only just completed the conditions for the second round, he was already impatient to move on to the third, and to do this, he needed to pass the second test. But he didn't have a single clue because the book turned out to be empty. The only hope was resonance. If he can upgrade it to the level of a second magic circle master. To reach the second test, the guy will pour mana into it, causing it to flow according to the principles of resonance. Hayul had already done this with the Heart's Call circle and thought that the resonance circle was somehow connected to it. He began to cast a spell, creating two loops, red and blue, that intertwined and hoped that it would work. The loops lit up, flew up to the book, and stuck to it. But nothing happened, and he decided that a short walk would help clear his thoughts, so he went outside. He enjoyed the fresh air and realized that sometimes it was enough for clear thinking. After his walk and breakfast, he decided to delve deeper into the secret of resonance. But suddenly someone from behind shouted at him to watch out. Kayul turned around in surprise and some object flew past him. Before he had time to come to his senses and do something, a bag flew into his face. A girl ran up to the guy and asked if he was okay, and the guy replied that he was in pain. He removed his hand from his face and realized it was Adela. They were walking down the street together, and the guy asked how it happened that a plastic bag was thrown at him. Adela explained that she was giddy with anticipation of drinking the banana milk, and the bag simply slipped out of her hands. The guy said that he understood everything, and she began to apologize and bow. Hyle said that it was okay, because at least he got banana milk for free. He asked her if she only drank it, and the girl replied that of course she did, because it was the best invention of mankind. They drank milk together, and the girl said that she heard that Hyle had gone home. The guy confirmed that yes, yesterday he was officially given back all his rights as the family heir. Adela smiled and asked if he was happy, and if that meant he still dreamed of becoming the head of the family. Shin was surprised and asked if he had really said that before. The girl remembered her childhood and said that yes, he often mentioned it. Kayul replied that no, it was no longer his dream. Adela wondered if he had finally accepted reality. She added that there are many other worthy candidates in the House of Magicians, and it is not easy to become the head. Hyle didn't understand why she was saying that, because his dream wasn't just to get the House of Magicians. He also wants to become the head of the Magic Tower. Or even worse, he wants to conquer the top of the entire magical world, and this is his goal. Adela, thinking about this, replied that it was some kind of unattainable goal, especially for someone who has gone through the same path as he has, because it is clearly not an easy one. At this time, in the family mansion of the House of Magicians, C was nervously biting her nails. She asked her older brother what was wrong with him and whether he wasn't worried at all. The boy replied that he was sure his father had his reasons, but he himself cannot believe that his father set such conditions. Recently, they both came into his office and asked why the man had called them. Inhyuk said that he knows them well, so he will have to give the guys a direct order. For the next few months, they must not even think about touching Hyo. Seo was furious and tried to say something, but her brother stopped her. She asked her father if he was saying this for a reason or not. Inhyuk replied that he was sure they knew. Hyul had been officially accepted back into the House of Magicians. His value is small because the guy has not participated in family affairs for a whole year. It might take him a couple of months to adjust again. And not just two, perhaps, will want to stop him, exerting pressure to a certain extent so that the guy does not encroach on the place of the head of the family. Jihan smiled and said that he understood everything and asked if anything else was needed. The father replied that no, they were probably tired and should go and rest. C asked her older brother why he didn't even argue. But the guy's face was distorted with anger, and he said that it still wouldn't have changed anything. Minhyuk and Minji are not interested in competing for the position of head of the family. Jihan could understand why they weren't invited, and asked if his father really wanted them to leave Hyul alone, just because he missed a year. Surely his father told the boy to somehow make up for lost time, since Hyul is aiming for the place of the heir because such protection is provided only to younger children under 16 who have received their artificial intelligence chips. Kayul was already 17, which meant he didn't fit into that category, and Jihan wondered why his father had demanded such a thing. Xia whispered that this couldn't be, but assumed that her father had already chosen a leader. Jihan replied that definitely not, because Hyul had demonstrated too little for his father to decide so. It looks like Inhyuk sees potential in him again. Perhaps he was just curious about this unusual magic that Hyul had developed, or perhaps the boy had forced his father to promise something in return. Seiya wondered if he thought there was a deal and asked what her brother could promise. Under normal circumstances, her father would never do this, and she simply doesn't have enough anger towards her brother. It seemed she would have to call off all the people she had introduced to spy on Hyula, and Jihan replied that she would, unless they wanted their shadows gutted. The shadows are the father's personal spies, a secret organization working for the family, and these people are good at everything, from infiltration and espionage to protection. The elder brother remembered that, by the way, he had already recalled his observers. C asked what he intended to do next. The guy explained that he would go first, and the girl rarely takes direct part in anything, but he himself did not like the idea of being inactive for 2 months. If Hyel did agree on something with his father, it could be dangerous, and he needs help from the Black Magic Tower. At the academy, the professor said that everyone had successfully passed the midterm exams and praised everyone. She asked for applause because he was very proud that a student from their class took first place. It was Shin Hyel, and upon hearing his name, the boy stood up and everyone began to whisper. The professor congratulated him, saying that it was safe to say that he was the best in the country among his peers. And since the guy's in first place, why not try to hold him over the next few months to take part in the World Olympiad? Kayul replied that this is exactly what he will strive for, and his classmates whispered that they didn't believe what he said and considered their success to be some kind of trick, but he was already pretending to be someone unknown. They laugh, saying that 2 months will be enough for him, and advise him to keep his pockets wider because he's leaving in a week. Everyone thinks that he will definitely lose his grip soon. Jisoo-chan stood after class stretching, happy that it was all over. 8 theoretical pairs are difficult, but Hyel replied that from tomorrow onwards there will only be practice. It will be no less difficult, but physical activity certainly won't hurt him. He said that Ji was clearly out of shape. Suchin didn't understand how that was possible because he would definitely beat the guy in magic, and now he's not weak in magic either. Hyel, leaving, said that if a guy doesn't like something, he just has to work on his weaknesses. Ji jokingly said that he would pump himself up and punch the guy in the head. Hyel didn't believe it and suggested that maybe he could take some food to the gym and they could work out there. Ji made a displeased face and the guy asked what was wrong with him. And the blonde replied that it wasn't that he didn't want to, it's just that he wasn't feeling very well today. Kyle tensed up and said that his friend should tell everything as it is, and if not, then no. Ji said he would be honest, he hates training and just doesn't like training with Hyel. Because, frankly speaking, the guy really scares him, and in fact, everyone thinks so. Here Kyle is already in the training hall of the Obelisk Academy in sportswear, all sweaty, squatting with a very heavy barbell. And he can't understand what's wrong with Suchan, because he just wanted to remind him about the importance of training. All the people watched the guy, not understanding who he was, and wondered if a person was capable of lifting such a weight, and then they found out that he was a second-year champion. Hyel put the barbell down and thought that he had been so focused on learning Whitenier's magical style that he had completely neglected physical exercise. He drinks his cocktail from a straw and thinks that this was also said in Adrid. Since the infinity circle circulates throughout the body, physical training can improve it. In a healthy body, there is a healthy circle, and they are interconnected. If a guy trains both magic and physical fitness, he will have the body of his dreams. Hyel headed to the training room where he was surrounded by 3 panthers. They had 3 eyes that sparkled, sharp claws, and 2 tails. When they attacked, the guy jumped aside, and then he used his magic, and beams of water passed through one of the panthers. When the other 2 attacked him, he ducked, and they bumped heads. After that, the guy used the magic Flame Volcano, and a fireball appeared in his hand. A few seconds later, he flew into one of the panthers, and it disappeared. Before the 3rd panther could attack, it also disappeared. They announced to Hyulu that the practical training with monsters was over. The professor sat nearby, looking at the tablet and looking for the result. He declared it a perfect score, and the boy thanked him. After that, he sat down in the corridor where there were several people and looked at his hand. Thanks to the infinity circles, his physical capabilities increased by at least 1.5 times. Once he reaches the 3rd circle, it will be even better, so he wants to strengthen the circle of infinity as much as he can. Hyel tried to concentrate. Magic was hovering around him, the circle of resonance, and 2 streams of mana were spreading along his entire body. Now, we need to reduce vibration and flow deviation by 12.25% and 4.63% respectively. Align the flow of the heart's call circle to 8.9%. The guy tried a little more, but immediately got tired and stopped. The synchronization was 99%, and in the end, this 1% is not given, no matter how much you try. But the guy is obliged to bring the 2nd circle to perfection, and he will definitely succeed. Kayul put on his headphones in the evening and went for a run down the street. Suddenly, as he turned the corner, an unknown figure met him and tried to hit him. Hyul reacted instantly, and despite being very surprised, he dodged. He stood next to him and asked the stranger who he was. When the moonlight hit the stranger's face, the boy immediately recognized it as Baek Sa-hyuk. But the guy tried to strike again, and Hyul dodged. Baek Sa-hyuk took off her mask and said that he was wriggling like a rat. Hyul, like a professional, picked up the earphone he dropped and asked what was wrong, since it was the weekend, and shouldn't he have gone home? Hyul smiled and sarcastically asked if it was not that Sayuk didn't want to go, but that he couldn't. It was probably because the guy was on probation and Sayuk told him to shut up. Hyul laughed because the guy used to intimidate everyone with his father, but now he is afraid of him. Or because of his failure, he does not want to show himself to his family. The guy started laughing at his interlocutor and he couldn't stand it. Started casting a spell and ordered him to shut up. Hyul was shocked that the guy was going to do magic on the street just because of a couple of harsh words. But Sayuk could no longer be stopped. He was angry and ran towards the enemy. However, the guy turned out to be more agile and stopped Sayuk by the hood in hand. He didn't have time to react in any way because Hyul turned him face down. Hyul sat on it, considering this situation a good opportunity for himself. The police arrived and detained Sayuk, who was screaming to be let go because he had to teach the boy some manners, but he was told to calm down and come with them to talk later. Hyul explained to the man that he was forced to somehow subdue him because he tried to attack him with combat magic. The CCTV camera must have caught it. He couldn't believe that Sahyuk would dare to perform magic in a public place. The man said that they would announce the details tomorrow at the academy, but now it was late, and it was better to return to his room. People tried to push the guy into the car, but he resisted. Hyul thought that it would be nice if Baek Sahyuk continued like this. The next day, almost all the students gathered near the news board where it was written that Sahyuk was caught using combat magic on the street. But he received a 10-point penalty, and everyone wondered why it was so low, since that would usually result in suspension from classes. Hyul thought the 10-point penalty was not surprising. The Beck family was influential and at one time donated a significant amount to the academy. Therefore, they could count on special treatment, and the academy would hardly risk severely punishing their son. He will probably hear enough moralizing to last him the rest of his life. Baek Sa-hyuk was talking on the phone with his father outside the academy, and his father was calling him names. The boy apologized, and his father shouted that he had asked him to keep a low profile until graduation. The man complained and asked if it was really that hard. He said that if the family didn't get the title because of him, he would be held responsible for it. Sahyuk replied that he understood, and his father hung up. The guy got really angry and threw the phone at one of the columns. His eyes were burning, veins stood out on his face, and he blamed Shin Hyul for everything. He stomped on the phone with his foot and called the guy an obnoxious scumbag. Suddenly, the teacher came up to him and said that the boy seemed to be full of envy. Baek Sa-hyuk realized that it was Instructor Smith and asked if he couldn't do that. The man replied that one can love or hate, because it is a person's right to choose. But he asked if the boy was not thirsty for real revenge. He said that he must take revenge on Shin Hyul. Hyul sat at the table in his room at night. He thought that Sahyoku had probably already been reprimanded, and that would only play into his hands. The boy looked at his phone and saw that he had received a message from his father. The man wrote that the contract with the Back family was made in exchange for them turning a blind eye to the incident, receiving 3% of the income from their magic stone mines. He called his son a good boy and wrote that if he needed something, he just had to say so. In order for the Beck family to receive an official title, they needed good relations not only with the academy, but also with other influential families. Therefore, they were forced to take extreme measures because the victim of the incident was Hyul. But he was not a simple man, but a direct heir to the House of Magicians, so the Beck family wanted to hush up this issue at any cost. And the 3% of the income from their magic stone mines was a very valuable asset, showing how important an official title was for any clan. The title was a sign of prestige. For example, the Divine Guardian clan had the title of Mystical, and the Wei clan had the title of Mysterious, and the title made the clan outstanding. In fact, Baek Sa-hyuk was now the family's scholar, and with his level of skill, he posed no threat to the boy. Hyul decided that it was time to stop playing Santa Claus and handing out gifts, and to return to working on resonance, and the next day he came to the academy. The academy appeared to have stepped up security measures following the recent incident. Suddenly, Instructor Smith came up to him and called him. At first, when Hyul turned around, the man just looked at him strangely and remained silent. He said that he had noticed long ago that perhaps Hyul did not like him. It was understandable because the man was strict, but he said all his words for his own good, and the guy shouldn't have misunderstood him. He asked if they should start over and extended his hand. Hyul said it wasn't worth it, but thanked him for the offer. Suddenly a dark aura enveloped him, and he felt sick. He did not understand what this strange feeling was. Smith said that, although it was belated, he congratulated the guy on his first place in the midterms, sincerely wished him further success, and Hyel realized that he was definitely oozing mana. Hyel couldn't understand if she was really that dark and sinister. Is this man really a representative of the Black Magic Tower? The Black Magic Tower is an unofficial organization, different from the officially recognized dozen. It is a group of criminals with impure intentions, led by a magician who calls himself the King of Black Magic. Hyel was completely shocked by the thought that his instructor could be connected to this man. This meant that there could well be other minions of the Black Tower within the walls of the academy, but it was unknown since when. Pushing all these thoughts aside, he realized that it didn't matter now and decided to first understand the structure of his spell in order to assess the situation. Hyel saw the formula of these spells in front of him, examined it, and realized that it was familiar to him, because it was mind control magic. However, his brain was immune to the effects of the mana's will. This means that Instructor Smith's mind control simply won't work on him. Kayul was glad that he was so lucky. The teacher didn't understand anything yet, and so it was better for him to pretend that the control was working. Then Hyel could figure out what exactly the Black Tower needed. Smith removed his hand from the boy and was glad that the magic had worked. The dragons were the ones who couldn't use AI chips, and who would have thought that a man would stoop to apologizing to him. He brought his face close to Kayul and ordered him to listen carefully. He then gave him the chip and told him that from now on he should always carry it with him, and never ask why he needed it, after which he ended the conversation. Hyel agreed with a glassy gaze. After this, the man demanded that the boy tell all the details about his modification of magic. Kyle understood that he could not reveal this in any way, and began to feign pain. He held his head, trembled, and the man decided that his subconscious was desperately protecting the secret of his unique magic. Seeing this, he canceled his request. Mind control magic, which targets the opponent's brain, is a spell that can subjugate a person. It is a signature skill for Black Tower mages, and, if used by a high-level mage, can even destroy a human brain. This makes it incredibly dangerous and also places it on the forbidden list, and as Hayul showed, a person can resist control to a certain extent. If the subject was something that was especially important to him, trying to tighten his control could lead to the destruction of his mind. And since the man gave in so easily, it meant that Hayul's modified magic was not their ultimate goal. Smith complained that the boy's magic was irrelevant to their boss's plan. He himself would gladly sell its secrets, but he could not fail the mission for the sake of fleeting desires. He snapped his fingers and said that then they would just wait until the mission was over, and he would still get the information he needed. Kayul suddenly came to his senses and was surprised, and the man asked if he was okay. He seemed to have withdrawn into himself during the conversation, and was apparently very tired. So they decided not to disturb him and let him go. Kayul agreed with the teacher and said goodbye to him. Smith turned and walked away, soon disappearing into the crowd. Behind his back, Kayul looked at him angrily. He walked past students who were discussing what they wanted to eat, suggesting going to the cafeteria, and reminiscing about yesterday's classes. Hyul sat down on a bench near the academy and looked at the chip in his hand. He realized that these were illegal artificial intelligence chips called the EU chip. It was obvious that they wanted to frame him by making him appear to be a user of a banned artificial intelligence. In this way, they tried to drag his reputation into the mud, calling his smile true hypocrisy. Instructor Smith himself had little reason to go so far, since their relationship, although strained, did not require such measures. So there must be someone who ordered this from the Black Magic Tower. This would explain a lot, because for someone constrained by thoughts and limitations, such a thing is hardly possible. Therefore, there is a high probability that one of his brothers or sisters was behind this. They wanted to hit his reputation in order to finally eliminate him in the race for the place of the head of the family. Minji had never been particularly active in power struggles and had no motive to organize such a thing. Minhyuk was interested in the leader's position, but he wasn't low enough to plan it. The guy most suspected the remaining two, who might have been acting together. He thought he could confront the instructor and find out everything directly, but he decided it was too risky, since the Black Tower would not forgive information leaks. Besides, the instructor might not know the identity of the customer, and then he would become a scapegoat, in which case the guy would only attract unnecessary attention from the Black Tower, which is extremely disadvantageous in the current conditions. After some time, Hayul came to another building and took the elevator up. When he reached the right room, he met Kim Kun-hun. He turned to the guest and asked why exactly the guy wanted to see him. Hyel remembered that this man was the Lord of the Blue Magic Tower, and his greeting today was colder than usual, but Kayul had no other choice. Kangen says he's a bit busy right now, so this is the perfect time. But Hyul decides not to retreat, because another chance may not present itself. Perhaps the man is busy with something, which is why he has been on edge lately. The guy asked if he had interrupted his research, and he said yes, because he was studying an unusual monostone. It took longer than he expected, and Shin looked away in surprise. On the table, on the pillow, lay an elemental stone. Hyul immediately realized that this was a good opportunity. They sat down together, and Cannon told the guy to get down to business quickly. He asked what was so important that he wanted to communicate that he insisted on an immediate meeting and definitely face-to-face. It seemed to Kayul that the man was irritated to the limit, and no matter what he said now, he was unlikely to agree to cooperate. He decided that they needed to come to some kind of agreement, and said that before they got down to business, he would like to share his knowledge. It was about the stone that the man was examining, the elemental stone. Cannon was very surprised. Does he really know anything about these stones, since their name has not even been officially revealed yet? Hyul had to choose his words very carefully, and the boy said that he had in no way been spying on the Blue Magic Tower. Cannon asked how he knew about it then, and the guy replied that it was simple. He took a stone out of his bag and said in a reserved tone that he had one of those rare specimens. Cannon jumped up from the sofa abruptly, his face expressing genuine surprise and even slight disbelief. Hyul calmly explained that it was a perfectly tuned elemental stone of the highest quality. Conan, still in shock, asked if he was able to personally and completely build this stone himself. Hyul confirmed without hesitation that yes, it was he who created it with his own hands. The man couldn't believe that he could do this, and he thought that he must be joking. James Pillar, the famous master of magical engineering from the Red Magic Tower, and the elite engineers from the Blue Magic Tower who had been working with magical stones for many years, were unable to figure them out. Even Conan himself, who is called the world's expert on magic stones, was unable to organize the flows of mana. And now they tell him that a simple student was able to cope with this. Cannon didn't believe it and asked if the guy was just lucky enough to set it up. The guy replied that yes, he believed that only the Lord of the Blue Magic Tower could help deal with such material, so he brought it with him. Cannon asked if Hyul wouldn't explain how exactly he had set it up. The guy said that he himself doesn't know it. It just happened by itself, and that's all he can say for now. Cannon replied that it meant that he got it by chance, set it up by chance, and was simply a lucky guy. But he added that any magician has the right to his secrets. He did not interrogate further, and Kayul thanked him for this. Cannon asked for the stone to take a closer look and realized it was a perfectly attuned mana stone that supported all four elements at once. Cannon returned it back and asked if he had brought it to create an artifact. Kayul agreed and admitted that he brought it for this very purpose. The man asked what kind of artifact he wanted. An item of clothing, jewelry, or perhaps a weapon. Hyul said that as long as the stone could enhance the effectiveness of elemental magic, anything would do. The man replied that he understood, but stones of such high quality require other high-quality materials. It could be expensive, and he asked the guy if he was ready for it. Cannon immediately apologized because a direct descendant of the House of Magicians was sitting in front of him, and he would present the bill to his father. Hyul said that there was no need for that, as he did not want his family to know about the artifact. Cannon called him a sly man and asked how he was going to pay then, since the amount would be huge. He asked if he could pay it out of his own pocket. Hyul replied that no, but he had something in return and another way to pay. He offered to attune all the elemental stones for them if they wanted, and to do it right in their presence. Cannon asked if the guy really meant to say that he was ready to reveal the tuning method to him. He laughed because it sounded tempting, and said that it was more than enough to pay, and frankly, they would even be in debt. Hyul asked if he could then ask for one favor. The man asked what particular service he wanted, and whether it was relevant to the agenda. The guy took an object out of his bag and handed it to the man. Cannon took it and realized that it was an EU chip, a banned artificial intelligence, and wondered where the guy got it. Hyul clasped his hands and said that there was a mage from the Black Magic Tower in the academy, and he handed this to him. He assumed that a criminal group was operating in the Obelisk Academy and asked for help in getting rid of them. Already at night, the car took Kayul to the place designated for him. He leaned over and thanked the girl behind the wheel, wishing her a safe journey. Cannon's assistant nodded, said that they would meet next time, and left. After taking a shower, Hyul lay down tiredly on his bed. He was lucky because who would have known that Kim Kun-yoon was researching elemental stones? Thanks to this, the boy will receive an artifact that even his father will not know about. In fact, he had wanted to use the 3% of shares he had received from the Beck family as a bribe in the negotiations. But now they had been saved. It was very good, and the guy's eyes began to close. He hoped that everything would work out. Earlier, Kanan, sitting in his office, could not believe that the Black Tower mages had gotten so close. They settled inside the Obelisk Academy, famous for its security system. The only evidence was an illegal AI chip, and the guy asked if that was too much to ask. The man smiled and said that under any other circumstances, the Blue Tower would not have taken seriously the testimony of a student with a tiny piece of evidence. But he agreed and decided to take a risk and start investigating this case. Koyul walked down the hallway and talked to a man who asked if he was there, to which the guy answered in the affirmative. And everything went according to plan on his subscriber. Hyul entered the elevator and was told not to worry. After all, if the information is correct, the Blue Magic Tower will not make mistakes. The guy was already riding in the elevator, saying that he understood everything, trusted the man, and they decided to call each other later. Kayula was greeted by a servant, and the guy walked along the red carpet. He said that here he was and greeted his brothers and sisters. Shin Minji, the second daughter of the House of Magicians, was happy because she hadn't seen Hyul for a long time. The guy replied that yes, and the girl hadn't changed at all, and she asked if it was a compliment, and he confirmed it. Minji noticed that the boy had grown up and might soon outgrow Minhyuk. The second son of the House of Magicians, Shin Min-hyuk, told the girl to stop, laughed, and added that she would jinx it. He put his hand on the guy's shoulder and said, "Welcome," admitting that it was a bit silly to be happy about it, but he was genuinely glad to see him. Kayul thanked his brother and thought that he was as honest as always. Minji began to scold her brother for constantly speaking without thinking, and the man did not understand what he said wrong. Kayul turned to his other relatives and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. Jihan and Si were sitting at the table. The first son of the House of Magicians, Shin Jihan, noted that his brother had matured and his face was no longer so childish. The first daughter of the House of Magicians, Shin Seiya, called the guy her youngest and also said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Outwardly, she was all smiles, but in reality, she was ready to eat Kayul alive, and he was sure that there was a villain among them, as he thought. Jihan raised his glass, invited everyone to sit down, and said that they should talk over food. He wondered why the younger one had gathered them all here. Kayul replied that there was no particular reason. He just wanted to see his brothers and sisters again after a long separation. Seiya was surprised that he actually called them for that reason alone, even though they were so damn busy. Hyul said he was sure that even if he had not set up the meeting, Sia and Jihan would have done so anyway. Si got angry, got up from the table, and asked how he could talk to his elders like that. She added that they needed to have a frank talk and find out what he was up to. Kayul didn't understand what she was talking about, and the girl told him not to act like a fool because he was going to fight for the place of head of the family. Kayul asked what would happen if he said he wasn't going to, and whether his sister would believe him. Si replied that of course she wouldn't believe it, so why all these questions? Jihan told his sister that she shouldn't have asked about it, because actions speak louder than words. He then asked his brother if he had invented a new magic, and offered to share the details of the modified magic. Hyul decided that this was a good move, and the request to share knowledge was a kind of test to see if he was a candidate for the position of head of the family. But they would not be able to drive him into a dead end. He pretended to be a sweet boy and said that it was a secret and his only hope. He shed a small tear because, as a human incompatible with artificial intelligence, he couldn't just rip his lifeline on everyone, and the competition had nothing to do with it. Minji also shed tears and said that in that case there was nothing to be done, because this was her brother's only hope. She wiped away his tears, and the boy thanked her for her understanding. Minhyuk laughed, raised his glass, and said that talking about competition was pointless, and it would be better for his brother to tell how he lived all this time. Minji agreed and added that she also wanted to listen to her brother's story. At this time, Jihan and Si were talking to each other. Minji, Minhyuk, and Hyul were happily chatting with each other. Hyul looked at his watch and realized that enough time had passed. Suddenly, everyone received a message on their phones from a stranger. Nobody understood what this message was and what kind of emergency had occurred. Seiya was surprised that this happened now at such a time. An emergency contact in the breaking news reported that a connection had been confirmed between someone from the Obelisk Academy faculty and the Black Magic Tower. The second son of the famous Smith family from France, Lang Smith, has been arrested, and this has been confirmed by Kim Kong-yoon's secretary from the Blue Magic Tower. Hyul immediately noticed the face of his older brother, who was already putting away the phone. He realized that this was exactly how his brother got caught. He remembered the look on his face when he deleted the message and wondered if he had done it himself. Kayul sat on the street, and they told him through his earphone that everything happened just as he predicted. He had read the news that Smith had changed the settings of the survival test equipment, and if the girl hadn't happened to look in, the scale of the disaster at the test scheduled for Friday could only be imagined. Conan asked how Hyel knew that Lang Smith would interfere with the test preparation. Kyle replied that it was a logical conclusion based on the information received. Considering that Lang Smith infiltrated the academy, he probably did it for a specific purpose. Also, considering the time period for which the mind control magic was cast, and the date of the survival test exam scheduled for Friday, was easiest to sabotage by damaging the equipment. Usually all equipment is checked one day before the exams, so the ideal moment to break in was right after the check. And just today, on Thursday night, Jan Su came into the room. Hyel asked the people from the Blue Magic Tower to monitor the equipment room while he was meeting with his brothers and sisters. Around this time, the representative of the Black Magic Tower should have been caught. In the end, Instructor Smith was indeed caught. Hyel also found out that it was Jihan who maintained contact with the Black Tower. By making sure that no one would know about his involvement, the guy got the information he needed with minimal risk, and it was a flawless operation. The only downside was that he only received circumstantial evidence confirming the connection between his brother and Instructor Smith, but he was unable to obtain anything substantial. Cannon said that he tried to help, but in the end it was Hyel who helped them, and the reputation of the Blue Magic Tower increased dramatically because they were the ones who dealt with the situation. He added that he would repay the guy someday, and he replied that he would not refuse. Kangan admitted that he liked his sincerity, but he had to go, so he hung up. Hyel thanked him for his work and decided that was the end of it. But suddenly a huge explosion thundered behind the guy. He was thrown to the side, fell, and did not understand what was happening. A figure emerged from the cloud of smoke and called out Kayul's name several times. It was Beksa Hyuk, whose eyes were burning with madness, and he, as if having lost his mind, wanted to take the guy's life at any cost. Hyel stood in complete shock, not believing his eyes when this ruthless and dangerous opponent appeared before him. Without thinking or realizing the consequences, Beksayuk threw a blazing fireball towards the boy. Hyel was amazed at the incredible speed with which his opponent was now able to cast complex spells. He, acting almost instinctively, used resonance magic, creating a shimmering water shield in front of him. But Sahyuk's attack was too powerful, and it was clear that the water shield would not be able to withstand such a strong blow. Holding one hand with the other, he used a static water shield. After that, unable to bear it any longer, he jumped to the side. The fireball touched the ground and burst into a huge explosion. Hyel looked at his hand and realized that he had not been able to completely avoid damage. It was wounded. Sahyuk laughed and told the boy to feel the difference in skills between them. He called him a defective piece of trash and asked if he was showing off. Kayua looked at the youth and could not understand what was wrong with him because his eyes were bloodshot. Even the skin turned red and saliva came out of the mouth. It was a reaction as if he had taken the illegal drug Berserker. This drug forcibly accelerates the magic circle, but at the same time the blood vessels begin to burst, and it was named so because the user looks like a real Berserker. But the worst thing is that the person will be ready to fight until he falls dead. Hyel thought that the scarlet flashes of mana were the third circle spell, Flame Infection. The guy didn't have time to come to his senses before Sahyuk was already standing in front of him, grabbing his hands. Kayul tried to fight back and called him a crazy psycho. And the guy replied that he was completely fine and that everything had finally fallen into place. His eyes were shining like a madman. He laughed and said that now Kayul would die. After that, he put his hand on the guy's chest and used Flame Infection. Hyel couldn't take the blow and fell down, and Sahyuk stood over him and laughed. But when Sahyuk saw that he was alive, he was very surprised. He covered his face with his hands and realized that the guy had blocked his magic twice. But he didn't understand how he could do it because he was defective and how he dared. He asked the same question several times and then shouted. Suddenly his mood changed. He became calm and thought that this was probably true. Hyel stood up and realized that everything was as he expected. The guy was in a stage of emotional instability, which is definitely a berserker. But something still didn't add up. The power of that magic was such that no matter how much berserker a person took, it was impossible to increase the magical power to that extent. Hyel thought that perhaps it was worth testing this and decided to cast a spell on the wind. He used the air spear spell and several birds made of wind appeared around him. Sahyuk looked at them calmly at first, not understanding what was happening. And then he asked what kind of magic it was, his eyes filled with anger, and he used fire magic. Kyle said that he was certainly a good man for dodging the spear, but he noted that he found himself with magic near his feet and said that the guy needed to be more careful. And now, before Sahyuk could react, the boy used airstrike. Just a couple of seconds later, Hyul was glad that he had hit the target. But Sahyuk started using Fire Strike even at this distance. It was the magic Fire Shot, and it was about to reach Hyul's face. Sahyuk put his hands out in the shape of a gun, shot fire, and told the boy to die. Fire pellet is known for being much more powerful at close range, but its range is only 7.74 meters. Hyel decided that if he jumped, he might be able to dodge. Fireballs were flying around him from all sides, but he dodged. Hyel asked the guy if he really hated him so much that he even implanted himself with an illegal EU. Sahyak laughed like crazy and didn't understand what chip he was talking about and what kind of nonsense he was talking about. Hyul realized that the boy seemed to remember nothing and realized it. Sahyak said he doesn't need tricks to defeat trash like him. He ordered them to stop talking nonsense and humbly accept their fate. Hyul said that the EU chip is capable of strengthening the user's body and adjusting formulas, but it is outlawed because it affects the strength and range of damage too much. Sahyak continued to scream and didn't understand why he suddenly needed to worry about this. Hyul said it was ironic, since he had recently been studying exactly what had to do with structural changes in mana circles and their influence on magical formulas. Thanks to this, the boy became very sensitive to changes in magic related to the strengthening of mana and the acceleration of circles. I don't know if it can be called luck or not, but he really did have an epiphany thanks to the illegal chip and the berserker. Hyul put his hand forward and said that he would not thank her, because he was more concerned about whether he could finish this before dawn, after which he used resonance magic. An extra level chip allows a person to use magic one ring higher than their current one. Over the past few days, the guy has studied a huge amount of information on this topic, including an Adrid. The problem was the penalty. Hyul tried to implement the spell in a similar way, combining the flows of magic circles to speed up, but it had negative consequences for the mind and body. The time until a penalty was received was 3 minutes, which was too little time for a second-round master. After that, the circle couldn't pump mana for 12 hours, so you had to think 3 times before using something like that. Sayuk shouted at the boy that he was muttering under his breath and was probably scared, but he replied that he would only have 3 minutes. He thought and decided that this time was enough, sat down on the floor and used the magic earth needles. The asphalt began to crumble, a huge crack appeared, from which many spikes burst forth. Sehyak didn't have time to jump back, and one of the spikes pierced his leg. He immediately realized that this was the magic of the third circle, and he couldn't believe that such a guy could have such power. Kayul just smiled and didn't know how to explain it. Sahyuk got out of the trap and screamed for the boy to die. Hyul noted that he was not only a bad sorcerer, but also used tasteless curses, after which he used a water shield. When fireballs were thrown at him, Hyul easily stopped them with water magic. Sahyuk laughed, calling the guy an idiot, and assured him that he would parry again like last time. He wished for it to burn to ashes, but immediately a water hurricane appeared. Sahyuk was extremely surprised and did not understand what it was, and the guy suggested that he first think before reasoning. Kayul noted that in his place he would have immediately understood that the water shield differed in level, just like the earth needles. Now Sahyuk's magic couldn't even touch him. Sahyuk started shaking with anger. His eyes turned red. Drool started flowing from his mouth, and he ran towards the guy. He stated that since he became stronger, it means that he must have used another doping drug, and that it was only because of it that he was winning. Kyle declared that it was all over, and the guy should not expect mercy because he asked for it. He stepped on the asphalt, and the floor surface around him turned into a thin layer of water, and then used darkness blindness magic. Everything around Sahyuk was plunged into darkness. He could hardly see anything and did not understand what was happening. Hyul thought that if the boy had been less obsessed with murder, all of this could have been avoided. Sahyuk began to panic, demanding that the enemy stop running and come out because he was supposed to attack, not hide. At this time, Kayul whispered a spell, combining the earth binding and the air binding. Chains flew from all sides and tied up Sahyuk, who immediately recognized this magic. An unknown liquid rose from the ground, wrapped itself around his legs and hardened. Hyul said that it was already late, and the last service he would render was to set him on the right path quickly and with maximum comfort. Sahyuk yelled at the guy to stop talking so much because he wasn't done with him yet and was blaming him for all his problems. Hyul replied that even if it weren't for him, Sahyuk would still have found someone to blame. He recalled that he knew why such chips were outlawed, in addition to their harm to health. Hyul reached up to his neck and touched the chip, sending a short pulse of mana into the overheated mechanism. He asked what it was like because even under the influence of a berserker, the pain must be unbearable. Sahyuk cried, spat, coughed, and begged to stop. Kyle explained that the overload of artificial intelligence in the body leads to the fact that it cannot withstand even the slightest external influence. He thanked him for his idiotic behavior because now the Beck family would pay in full again. This time the stakes were even higher than last time, 30, maybe even 40% of the income from the magic stone mines. The guy said goodbye to Sahyuk and thanked him for his contribution to his money tree. Multicolored loops appeared on his hand and he placed his palm on the chip. After that, Sayuk's body was pierced by a sharp pain that he could do nothing about. Now he was lying on the floor with steam coming out of his neck. Kyle picked up his phone from the floor and made a call. He greeted his father, who asked him why he was calling at such an hour. Kyle reminded that his father saw everything and should not pretend. Despite the late hour, the absence of students on the street seemed too natural since even the police were not visible, although they made a lot of noise. The father tried to justify himself by saying that the students could have simply hidden, and his ability to stop the police did not mean that he did so. Hayul noted that many people could have stopped the police, but only his father would have watched the fight, while anyone else would have intervened or stabbed him in the back. Moreover, thanks to their agreement, his brothers and sisters could not spy on him. In-hyuk laughed and admitted that his son was right, and it really was him. The bushes nearby began to move, and a dark figure emerged from them. Father said that he had assigned Seok-hyun to Hayul. The men in black surrounded Sahyuk and began to examine him while Hayul stepped aside. His father asked him why he was calling if he already knew about the surveillance. Hayul admitted that he just wanted to show off his third lap. In-hyuk replied that he didn't remember any significant achievements recently, and asked if he had been hiding the third circle of magic from the beginning. Hayul confirmed that this was indeed the case, but in fact it was a lie since he was only using the acceleration of the resonance circle for short-term amplification. He said that he still lacked strength, and if his brothers and sisters found out that he owned the third circle, it would be bad. The pressure from Jihan and Sia will increase dramatically. However, he has one more thing, as Seok-hyun used a soundproof barrier, and Lucy's magic to isolate them from the surrounding people. Now he noted that this was not a bad measure, and said that he had sent a car and they should return home and spend the night there today. Kyle thanked him and said that they would see each other no later, after which he hung up. Suddenly a smile appeared on In-hyuk's face, and then he laughed. He thought he didn't know what his son had been doing for the past year, but his confidence was impressive. Hayul turned to Seok-hyun, noting that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The guy, without wasting any time, took off his mask and said that it was a really long time ago. He apologized and promised to quickly heal him, using magic to heal the small wound on his face. He provided first aid and left the rest to the staff of their family. Hayul thanked him and said that then they needed to deal with the rest of them here. Seok-hyun put on a mask and said that this matter was unlikely to go beyond the barrier. Jihan stood nervously and straightened his tie. He turned to his interlocutor and asked why everything turned out this way. An unknown man covering his face and sitting on the couch asked the guy if he had just finished work. He already thought that it would last all night, although he liked the sofa, and Jihan realized that this was a man from the Black Tower. The man said yes, but that was not the point, and expressed surprise that the Blue Tower had intervened and messed up all their plans, since it was hard to work when people were arrested before the case even started. Jihan, hearing the man's laughter, was furious and asked if there was any reason to laugh in this situation, since the tower promised that everything would work out. He wondered if their promises were worthless or if they wanted to destroy him. The man apologized, explaining that he often laughs on his own, and said that since the mission had failed, the money would not be returned and all evidence would be carefully removed. All this is done for the sake of the client, so there is no need to worry about information leakage. Langsmith would never see the dawn again, but Jihan replied that he did not care about his life. He is more concerned about the illegal AI chips he gave to Hayul and Sayuk along with the Berserker, and asked how they planned to deal with it. The man replied that the boy shouldn't worry since Baek-seok was no longer capable. Jihan was surprised and asked what this meant. The man explained that it appeared he had attacked Kayul's dog. Because of this, he is now hardly distinguishable from a walking corpse due to the side effects. Jihan said that this nonsense did not bother him, and asked what was wrong with Hayul. He replied that he might be slightly injured but was otherwise fine, and Jihan began to get angry, suspecting that the man was simply distracting him, but he stated that he was only stating the facts. Jihan realized that his brother had managed to defeat Sahyuk, who was under the influence of Berserk and the chip at the same time. The man smiled and said that everything was correct, but that was not all. When Baek-seok attacked the boy, it was unknown whether he did it for observation or for protection. Mr. Seok-hyun appeared there and immediately cast a soundproof barrier and illusion magic. The man was unable to watch the fight to the end, but noted that it was exciting. Jihan realized that the shadows were involved and asked the man if he knew since when Seok-hyun had been accompanying his brother. The man said he first noticed it when Jihan and Hayul's paths crossed, but he wasn't sure. Seok-hyun works directly for his father, and Jihan asked if the man meant to say that the shadow leader was personally involved, and why someone like him would be assigned such a thing. If the shadows were involved, they would have to be extremely careful, and it looked like they would have to give up on the idea of getting their brother for a while. He asked the man what to do with the chip he had given to Hayul, but he replied that there was no need to worry. The chip has a self-destruct program built into it, so it's most likely already been deactivated and destroyed. He asked if there were any more questions, but received a negative answer. The man walked up to the window and said that he was leaving then, as he had to deal with Lang Smith. He jumped down and said goodbye to his dear client. Jihan watched him go silently and thought that he needed to get rid of all the evidence that could lead Kim Seok-hyun to him. It was easy to break through the protective magic of Jihan's house, so it was necessary to hurry. A few days later, Hayul closed the book he had finished reading in his room. He placed it on the table and stretched. Today, the Lord of the Blue Magic Tower informed him that Lang Smith suddenly clutched his heart and died before the ambulance arrived. The guy knew something like this could happen, but he didn't expect them to be so serene. He thought that at least Seok-hyun was able to properly handle the incident with Sayuk. A sudden message interrupted his thoughts. His father wrote about the need to talk with the Beck family. To settle the matter, he was offered 43% of the income from their mines, and his father said that with this money, financing the overseas business would no longer be a problem. Hayul smiled when he saw such a long message and assumed that his father was happy at that moment. He decided that he was glad of the successful outcome, but now he had a much more important event awaiting him. There are 53 days left until the academic Olympiad, and the whole world is watching it closely. Suddenly, a beam of magic appeared around the guy. He realized that it was a 12-hour fine in glass. Now it is time to reach the third circle. He used magic, opened the book and touched it, preparing to take on the next trials. Just a few seconds later, he disappeared back into the book. Opening his eyes, he did not understand what this dim, empty space was. Another dimension inside the book. Suddenly, a girl appeared next to him, greeted him, and said that he was on the second page of the tests. Her name was Beta, and she was the conductor of the second page test. Hayul wondered if this test would be like the first one. Then the task was given by Alpha, the guide of the first page. It consisted of establishing the final order in the elemental stone. The girl said that the second page tests the mastery of the current mana circles. The details of the test will be revealed as you progress through it. And if successful, pages 32 through 81 will open, containing information about the third circle of mana. Kyle was shocked and did not believe that this was possible. He was surprised that they gave him page 81 at once because he thought that they would give him no more than 15 pages. This, of course, was pleasing, but it meant that the third circle was on a completely different level because the circle of the call of the heart and the circle of resonance were already good. But the new one was clearly many times different. The guy waited for him impatiently, but also with trepidation. Beta announced that the tests were beginning and disappeared. A voice appeared and said that he would now tell the student about the second test. Magic circles will appear in front of him, 100 in a row, and he will need to activate them all. When the first circle appeared, he did not hesitate to touch it with his hand. The teacher said that if he could synchronize his circle of resonance with each of them, they would activate naturally. Hayul continued to cast his spell, but suddenly noticed that the circle had changed. The voice said that each magic circle was renewed every 3 seconds, and if he didn't manage to do it in that time, he would have to start over, so he had to be careful. Hayul thought it would be enough to remember the sequence, but the teacher warned that it would change every time. So he realized that this test would definitely not be easy. He took a deep breath and decided it was time to give it a try. After some time, he was already standing in his room and looking at the book. His face was pale and he himself was very tired. His head was almost out of order. It took him 8 hours to complete this, but the record was only 10 laps. Although he gradually got the hang of it, intuition alone was not enough, and a pattern had to be identified. So he sat down among the mountains of books, began to study everything carefully and take notes. The teacher had previously said that Idrid was the only book he had written, and if he hit a wall, he should look for other manuscripts. They will definitely help him in his new achievements. Hayul was very surprised to hear that this book was not the only one of its kind, which meant that the time would come to look for new books. However, he did not know their location or even their names. After a couple of minutes, he decided he needed some fresh air and a change of pace, so he went outside. A girl with shopping bags met him near the store. Kayul immediately recognized her as his classmate Adela. They walked a little further together and sat down on a bench. Hayul noticed that they had been running into each other quite often lately. He told the girl that she looked like she hadn't slept all night, and she admitted that she did. She said that she had read an interesting article. Its title was Possibilities of Technical Implementation of Teleportation Magic. Hayul noted that the title was controversial, and Adela agreed, but said he should still read it. She handed him the tablet and he began to read it carefully. At this time, Adela was sitting nearby and drinking banana milk. After some time, Hayul returned the tablet to her and said that it was interesting, But there was one peculiarity. They both said that there was no logical conclusion. These conclusions were based on an analysis of information from ancient manuscripts by Rabel Whitener. Seeing this name, the guy experienced a strong shock. He reread the text again and realized that the structure and content were different. There were a number of theories that Whitener himself had put forward, but the information was superficial and without much depth. Hyul asked the girl who the author of the article was, and she admitted that it was Go Sang-jun. The guy was already in his room, sitting at the table and looking for something on his laptop. He recalled the name he had heard recently and knew that this magic researcher was so unknown that there was not even any information about his age or gender. Besides, this article was his only one, and he wondered if the criticism had put him off. This was the maximum that the guy could learn while remaining a simple student. He picked up the phone and started calling the head of the Blue Magic Tower. But Kayul himself was far from an ordinary student. In the Blue Magic Tower, Kim Kong-yun received a call from Hayul. The man had been exploring all night long and asked the guy what had happened to him. Kyle replied that he had found one thing that would benefit both of them. These words greatly surprised and interested Kim Kong-yun. The guy asked the man to help him find one person. After some time, Hayul came to the Obelisk Academy and trained in the training hall. His opponent was Ji Su-chan, who tried to fend off the guy's attacks. Hayul used wind magic and several birds flew towards the enemy. Ji yelled at his friend, claiming it was a scam. Hayul didn't understand what the problem was because it was only the first magic circle. Sujin was surprised that the guy was even asking, because in the first circle of magic this was simply impossible. The guy tried with all his might to dodge and did somersaults. When the windbirds were very close, he used several shields from all sides. Hayul noticed that his friend was eventually able to block the attack properly. Ji Suchin said that now it was time for hand-to-hand combat training. Kayul replied that he was not against it, but he doubted that the guy really believed in victory. With cheerful enthusiasm, Ji said that it was worth a try. Before he could do anything, Kayul ran up to him and grabbed him by the collar. He then used all his strength and flipped his opponent over. Everyone present in the hall was in complete shock. Hayul, looking at his friend, said that the idea was a bad one, because in hand-to-hand combat there was nothing to modify. He added that it was the body strengthened by the second circle versus the body strengthened by the third that decided everything. And Ji asked if that was an insult. He thought that it was unfair because not only was his magic strong, but Hayul was also a beast in close combat. The guy thought that Kayul was playing dirty. The friend replied that if he was unhappy, he should train his endurance. Ji asked what his plans were because he heard that he was going to the Olympics. Kayul was surprised and did not understand how his friend found out about this. Suchin said that he had known him for a long time, and it was obvious because he walked around all day absorbed in himself. And even during the test of suppressing magic stones, he was constantly distracted. For the average student, the time to complete the course is 27 seconds, but he spent a whopping 74 seconds there. In recent days, whether it was training or a test, the guy always took first place by a wide margin. If he's going to compete with seniors at the Olympics, he mustn't lose his form. But in his current state, Kayul would not win the Olympics, and he himself understood this. Ji asked if he agreed with this because he knows a lot. Besides, the main favorite of the Olympics is a fifth circle mage, so if he still only uses the second, victory is unlikely. Kayul realized that his comrade was right, and if he wanted to perform well, he would have to try hard. He could temporarily speed up the second lap to the level of the third, but that was not enough. To fight on equal terms, he needs at least the fourth circle, and for that he must find Go Sang-jun. Following the map on his phone, Hayul approached the desired address. Cannon apologized over the phone for being late, as he didn't think he would be looking for a person for a whole week, but admitted that this was also his first time. He approached and reported where Go Sang-jun was now. Hayul was surprised to learn that this was the same used bookstore he often visited. He thought that the most inconspicuous places were always in plain sight, and he couldn't believe that it turned out to be right opposite the academy. After the boy was found to be incompatible with interactive magic, he began to actively study from books, including used ones. He wondered if he had taken Adrid from this very library. Kayul approached the building, opened the door, and said hello. There was a guy sitting at the table sorting through books. Upon seeing him, the store owner greeted Hayul and noted that they had not seen each other for a long time. The man said that everything was going as usual and mentioned that he had heard about his success in magic. He noticed that Hayul now looked much healthier and he thanked him. The man replied that there was nothing to thank him for since he only sold books, but it was thanks to them that the guy had advanced so far. He added that even if he was just selling them, he was pleased to hear such words and asked why he came. Hayul said he would like to meet Go Sang-jun. The man was surprised why he needed this man and how he knew about him. Kayul explained that he read an article under his name, became interested, and asked his friends. He ended up here and apologized for secretly collecting information. He added that it was important to him and he really wanted to meet him. The man said he remembered something and agreed to arrange a meeting. Kayul was delighted, bowed, and thanked him. The man interrupted him, saying that he was unlikely to get any answers at this meeting. The guy was surprised and didn't understand what he meant. The man said that he just needed to follow him and open the door since Sanjun was inside. Together they walked to the next door. The man said that the one he was looking for was right behind that door, and Hayul, opening it, was very surprised to see Go Sang-jun. In the room on the bed there was a guy with dried lips and a breathing apparatus on his face. An IV was attached to his arm, and the rhythmic sound of the life support machine could be clearly heard. The father sadly stopped in front of his son's bed, who could not move. His face was pale, his hair seemed to have turned gray, his eyes were downcast and closed. Hayul was in complete shock when the man explained that this was his son, Go Sang-jun. Hayul asked if he could find out what happened. The man replied that of course he would tell, since his son had broken a taboo. This was the same taboo that affected all wizards. He launched a mana circle through the brain, which was considered forbidden in the magical world. Hayul, hearing this, was very surprised because it meant that the guy was trying to do the same thing as he himself. He asked why he decided to do something like that. The man explained that it was all for the sake of his scientific work. He had a choice: either prove the validity of his theory or give up halfway, and the first was only possible by launching mana directly into the brain. The man said he had to stop him at any cost. It thus appeared that this man had been introduced to Weitner's magical style through another source. The man admitted that he would hardly be able to answer all of his questions, but I am sure that my son would be very happy to discuss his work with the guy. Kayul didn't know that everything happened exactly like this, and he apologized because he shouldn't have started this conversation, realizing that this was a difficult time for the man. The man said that it was nothing to worry about because he knew how strong Hayul's passion for science was. He personally witnessed how meticulously the boy searched for magical literature every day, reminding him of his son in this. The guy approached the seller with a request, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, to let him look at the literature on which his son wrote his scientific work. The man was surprised by his interest in Sanjun's books, but said that they were gathering dust anyway, so it would be better to give them to someone who would benefit from them. However, the man had two requests. If the guy wants to continue his son's scientific work on teleportation magic, he will have to include him as a co-author. Kyle replied that of course he would do so, and then the man moved on to the second request. Whatever the boy read, he shouldn't try to run a flow of mana through his brain, and Hyle promised to take that into account. The man led him into his son's room and said that this was where he had studied and left his books. He noted that these were probably the ones the boy would need most and pulled out several volumes. Suddenly, Hyle's attention was drawn to a very strange book. A second later, she fell off the shelf, which made the guy a little scared. He looked at the book and realized that it reminded him of Adrid. While the man was collecting other books, the boy asked what the volume was that had fallen out. The man said that Sanjun often carried it with him, as if it contained something important. He added that the guy could take it. Perhaps the object of his interest would be found there. Kyle thanked him and opened the book, finding the same horrible handwriting inside. He realized that she and Adrid clearly had the same author. Hyle asked the seller if he could take the book to read, and the man agreed, saying that he could take whatever he needed. Hyle was delighted and thanked the man. Then he asked if he had ever come across a book with the same handwriting or a luxurious red hardcover book. The man said that he did not remember anything like that because luxurious books were rarely found in their modest library. Hyle didn't understand where Sanjun got it from then. He wondered how Adrid had ever fallen into his hands. Already in his room, he sat on the bed, looking at both books and thinking that he had dug through the entire library. But only this one looked like Adrid. Even finding one such book was a success, and the guy was happy. When he took both books in his hands, a spark passed between them, and light appeared. The guy was shocked and didn't understand what this glow was. Suddenly, the book opened. Magical flowers and objects fell out of it, and a voice said that he was bequeathing this book to the rightful owner of Adrid. Hyul realized that he was being pulled back into the book. The voice said that this book was named Mimir, and the boy should enjoy its contents with all his heart. Before he was carried away, he realized that it was the teacher's voice, and he was pulled back into the book dimension. He woke up in an unknown room with a teddy bear sitting next to him. The guy looked around and didn't understand where he was. Suddenly, someone came up to him from behind and touched his neck with a small hand. When he turned around, he saw a little girl, happy that he had been caught, and welcoming him into the Mimir book. Kayul looked at the stranger in surprise and asked who she was. There, smiling cheerfully, she replied that she was Mimir. She explained that she was responsible for a dimension called the Mimir Well. The girl extended her hand to the guy, said that she was glad to meet him, and called him her successor. Heil asked what the Mimir Well was, and the girl explained that this was the name of this library. Rabel Whitener specially prepared this place for his successors. The library is intended for those who follow the path of the teacher. Kayul noted that it looks rather modest for a library in the usual sense. The girl explained that this was because his achievements were still modest, and the Mimir Well was capable of expanding depending on the level of the successor. Judging by the current size, the guy didn't even pass the second page test. After this, she asked the guest to address her informally. She added that they would see each other often, and formalities would only create unnecessary discomfort, so they should switch to informal terms. Kyle smiled and agreed with her words. The girl noted that he was quite good since he managed to find her already on the second lap, and this was amazing. Kyle asked what was so significant about him finding her so quickly, and she replied that it meant he would be able to safely reach the fifth circle right away. Hearing this, Kyle was shocked. Already the fifth circle, how is this possible? Mimir began to cast a spell and flew into the sky. A book slid out of one of the shelves and flew towards her. The girl handed him a book and said that he should read it, and then he would understand everything. Hayol opened the book and realized that it was resonance theory in all its details. Mimir explained that in this place he would find all the information that could not be contained in Adrid, including information about the book he was holding. The guy asked why not just include it in Idrid. She replied that Adrid was already overloaded with a large number of pages of tests to thoroughly test the successor. There are other reasons why Idrid contains only the bare essentials, which necessitated the creation of separate books. Kayol asked whether the teacher had written in more detail in the Mimir Well. She explained that Adrid contains the main points, while this book is better viewed as a reference. He asked if all the books contained information of a certain level, and if their number would grow along with his achievements. Mimir confirmed that this was so and asked if he would now figure out how to reach the fifth circle. The guy replied that of course it would be easier for him to cope with the second test. He opened the book and all the hieroglyphs in it began to glow, and he read carefully. Suddenly he found himself in another dimension, flying and rejoicing that he had reached the 79th circle. The second test required him to activate 100 magic circles, but during the first attempt he was only able to activate 10 circles in 8 hours. After visiting the Mimir Well, his result was 79 laps in one go. It's been too hard so far. However, if he tried hard, he could handle 100 that night, and if he was unlucky, he could do it the next night. Getting hold of Mimir's book before the Olympics was pure luck. Hayol walked down the corridor of the mansion behind the maid. He wondered why his father had called him, and if it was related to the compensation he had received after the incident with Sahyuk. The boy planned to study with Mimir again after classes, but it seemed the matter was important. The maid announced to the man that his son had arrived, and he allowed him to enter. Inyuk glared at his son, told him to sit down, and said he would be brief. Unlike last time, it was not 100% his merit, and his contribution could be estimated at a little more than half. In the previous case, the guy received 26% of the shares in the mines of magic stones. This was a significant advantage, so the guy deserved to be rewarded accordingly. Father asked Kayul if he had already decided what he wanted. The boy, without hesitation, replied that he wanted an ancient relic kept deep in the family treasury. Inhyuk was very surprised because ancient relics are rare, keeping incredible secrets, and they are not just antiques. Kayul countered that he did not consider them a myth, and believed that the legends and events described in the myths were true. The father understood that his son was still young, and it was rather naive to believe this. He respected his choice, but warned him that he could only take one item. Kayul beamed with happiness and thanked his father. Inhyuk asked what kind of relic he wanted. The guy said he wanted an ancient relic kept under the treasury, namely Raybal Whitener's cloak. Together they descended into the underground treasury of the entire Shin family. There the man handed Inhyuk a box with golden patterns. The father handed it over and said that he hoped his son would not regret this choice. Kyle replied that he was very happy and thanked his father. Inhyuk couldn't even believe that the guy had bought into such stupid stories, but it was probably because he was young. However, he must focus on training so that he has no regrets in the future, and now return to himself. The black limousine in which Hayel was sitting was driving along the road. He thought that most of the heirlooms their family possessed were genuine. If this is indeed Rebel Whitener's cloak, then that's great. No 30% of the income from the magic stone mines can compare to it. But is it really real? Kyle decided to open the box, in case it was a fake. He took out the cloth and was completely shocked to see fibers made of pure mana. Mana cloth is a valuable material obtained from magic stones through special processing. There are fewer than 30 craftsmen in the entire world who can perform such processing, but this cloak is made not partially but entirely from mana fibers. Moreover, this technology was not available in their time, as this fabric surpasses all known artifacts made of mana fibers. The boy had never seen anything like it before. Already in his room, he sat and looked at the cloak. He noticed the painting on it and the terrible handwriting. That's why he believed that this was the work of his teacher, because he was already used to deciphering his scribbles. But he didn't understand what was happening because the structure of the fabric seemed to be mixed up with the outer and inner layers. Another reason why mana tissue is difficult to work with is that the outer and inner layers must be worked separately. The inner layer should improve conductivity and mana efficiency, while the outer layer should, on the contrary, reduce conductivity, reducing incoming damage. But this cloak has the exact opposite design. The outer layer attracts mana and increases damage to the mage, and the inner layer blocks it, reducing the power of outgoing spells. The teacher would never have made such mistakes, and the boy decided that he simply needed to turn the cloak inside out. With a little effort, he turned the cloak inside out. But even so, the structure of the inner and outer layers did not change places. So it turns out that this was done intentionally, but for what purpose? Hyul couldn't understand whether it was really an ancient relic, and why his father had sent it to gather dust in storage. The Book of Mimir opened, began to shine, and sweets and toys fell out of it. A couple of seconds later, the guy found himself in another space. He was greeted by Mimir, who was reading a book with stuffed animals, and asked how he was doing. She immediately noticed the magic cloak in his hands. As she got closer, she saw that it was Rabel Whitener's cloak. She was surprised that the guy had already found it because he was simply amazing. Kayul said that this cloak was somehow strange and handed it to the girl. Mimir looked at him for a while and then cried out, "Ouch!" She asked the successor, he was still on the second round, and the guy did not understand what the question was about. But now it became clear why he still didn't know, and Hayul said that he wanted to know how this thing could be used. The girl apologized because she was sorry, but she couldn't explain why the cloak was designed that way. Hayul didn't understand why, and Mimir handed the cloak back to him. She explained that there is a special magic to Whitener's style. She immediately covered her ears because she shouldn't have said this, but she got confused. In the end, she only told him that in the style of Whitener, there is a special magic, which is called true. It is different from the usual magic, because true magic is real. Hayal wondered if he was still using fake magic. The girl replied that unfortunately this was true, and she could not reveal the whole truth about true magic until he reached a certain level. Kayul rubbed his chin and asked if this was some kind of limitation. Mimir replied that yes, this cloak was an artifact created to aid in the creation of true magic. The boy asked if this meant that Mimir would not tell him anything about her, and she noted that he was a quick learner. Hayul asked what level of circle he needed to get an explanation about this artifact. Mimir was silent for a moment and then said that he needed the 5th circle of magic. More precisely, mastery of the 5th circle to open the 5th page of tests. After all, the magic of the 5th circle of the Whitener style will shine even brighter from this level. Kyle was making very good progress, and now it's the 98th circle, the 99th. And when he reached 100, all the circles exploded and fireworks appeared in the sky. Kyle was happy because he finally succeeded. The teacher congratulated him on passing the second test, which must have been quite tiring, but the boy had worked hard. Now the teacher was going to teach him how to weave the 3rd circle of magic. The 3rd level of the Whitener style is called the Circle of Interaction. Hayul sat in his cloak and closed the book, because he had successfully passed the second test, and now it is time to create the 3rd circle of magic. If he hadn't had the cloak and the Mimir well, the second test would have taken much longer. The night before, in the Mimir well, the girl said that the boy needed the magic of the 5th circle. Kayul, having heard all this, realized that he had no choice. Until he becomes a 5th circle master, he will have to put this thing on the back burner. Mimir stopped him, because she couldn't send such a valuable thing to gather dust in storage. But the guy didn't understand how to use it because the outer and inner layers were mixed up and would only get in the way. Mimir took the cloak and said that it allows one to prevent mana from leaking out by locking it inside, which will allow the boy to reach a state of mana overload. If he has an excess, the circle of infinity will rotate even faster, which means the mana filling his brain will also increase. In other words, he will be able to get rid of fatigue faster, and the same applies to physical exhaustion. Hayul replied that he realized that wearing a cloak would reduce his sleep time. Mimir said that with this cloak you don't have to sleep at all anymore. Kyle was surprised. Did he really not need to sleep at all? Mimir confirmed that this is indeed the case, adding that if you wear it for at least 5 hours a day, it will quickly reach its peak. And that's just one of the side effects of the cloak that might not be worth sharing with your successor. Hyel said that he would definitely reach the fifth circle as quickly as he could. The girl told him that this work only works on the successor, and for an ordinary person, it is poison. And the guy replied that he understood everything. With such a cheat item, subsequent tests would be a piece of cake, and so 2 days later he was sitting in his room. He was so close, but there was still a feeling that something was missing, and he thought that he would soon understand how to reach the circle of interaction. The circle of interaction, the third circle of the Whitener style, allows one to interfere with the spell-making process of others. In order to interact with someone else's mana, you must be in perfect sync with it. Now it was clear why it was necessary to synchronize all those circles, to learn how to influence someone else's magic. Hyel smiled because it sounded very interesting. But, to be honest, he hadn't even thought about it, and didn't expect that the second test would serve as a basis for creating the third magic circle. To weave the third circle, the heart call and resonance circles must be in perfect harmony, and connect well with the surrounding mana. Continuing to use resonance, the boy formed a third circle. He stood up and decided that this time he would succeed. He tried to gather the images in the air and synchronize them together, taking into account the excess mana in his body. It was like building a new house, brick by brick, and he was sitting in the lotus position with colorful loops swirling around him. Mana found refuge in his body, and everything he absorbed responded with voices. These voices whispered that they wanted to play, and that it was so warm here that they didn't want to go outside. The guy had already come this far, but it was only halfway there, and he had to maintain the resonance. The spirits joked that they needed a spacious playground, and they held hands, stood in a circle, and began to sing and dance. Hyel felt hot, because if the mana deviation rate differed by more than 1%, his body would not be able to accommodate it. So far, he had only mixed in what did not deviate from 1%, and it was necessary to gradually reduce the deviation rate to 0.01%. He did all this by directing the mana of the circle quietly, carefully, and almost unnoticed by those around him. Morning came, and the guy, exhausted from the night's work, sat right on the cold floor. He raised his head, and large drops of sweat slowly ran down his tired face. He rose to his feet and realized with satisfaction that everything was finally ready. He activated the first circle magic called First Call of the Heart. He then used his other hand to launch a second-level circle known as Resonance, and immediately, without wasting time, he used the third-level circle, Interaction. Hyel, having finally obtained the third circle of interaction, strove to become a master of the fifth circle as quickly as possible. After some time, the guy was lying on a tree and several birds were sitting on him. He thought about the combat survival test, which was a large-scale test on spacious training grounds. Usually held in the rocky terrain of Gangwon Province, the test lasts 32 hours and each student is given special and evaluation artifacts. It was a simple test in which the participant was required to survive as long as possible in a gradually shrinking zone over the course of 32 hours. Kayul glanced at his watch and realized it was time to move out. The difficulty was that it was necessary to survive not only in battles with monsters, but also with other students, and also to earn points. When a strange sound was heard, the bird sitting on the boy took off and flew away. Under the tree stood his classmate, who was aiming at Hyel with fire magic. The guy reacted instantly, jumped from the tree, dodged the attack, and landed nearby. The schoolboy noticed that Kayul was dodging, but he was sure that he would not be able to escape anyway. Hyel swung his fist, intending to hit his opponent, but the latter created a barrier and mockingly asked if Hyel was seriously going to fight with his fists. Hyel used interaction magic and touched the barrier. The barrier cracked and began to collapse, causing great surprise to the enemy. Then Hyel used Earth Push and the boy flew to the side. The enemy was amazed that his barrier could not withstand even a simple push from the ground. Kyle asked which of them was the fool, since the enemy had attacked from behind. He noted that he shouldn't have started shouting, since that only gave away his presence. Hyel thought that perhaps this was the real power of interaction that he had just used. He easily broke the core of the second circle's barrier, allowing it to be broken through with a normal push from the first circle. The voice announced the elimination of student Kanjurak. Kyle left, arguing that his opponent had exposed himself, and that was why everything worked out. The watch on his wrist showed that he had received 10 points, which was a good start. As he wandered through the forest, he thought that he seemed to have already become addicted to the new circle, and would soon begin to use it against the magic of the third circle. Suddenly, something ran quickly behind him. Kyle turned around in surprise and looked in that direction. Then he used magic and threw a fireball there. Before he could react, he saw Bloodclaw wolves appear from both sides and surround him. They seemed to be attracted by the sounds of the recent fight. If he were an ordinary student, he might have complained about the injustice or even cried. However, Hyel was one of those who unconditionally aimed at first place, and was only happy with this turn of events. One of the wolves raised its head and began to howl. After this, the whole pack rushed at Kayul, but he was ready to attack. At this time, someone, sitting at a tablet, watched his fight. They listed the names of students worth mentioning: Adela Stewart, Ji Suchin, Kim Kong-soo, and Ma Jae-hak. If things continue at this pace, these students will definitely make it into the top 10, although it will be difficult to hold out until the end. The girl noted that now no one doubts Shin Hyul's outstanding skills. Instructor Guo Chang-soo watched his battle with close attention and interest. Then he smiled and agreed with this assessment. Another man noted that the guy clearly did not look like an amateur ready to be expelled, since he took first place by a large margin during training. Now he was leading with an unrivaled result. What was surprising was that he knew the habits of the Blood Claws and specifically waited until they gathered the entire pack. This was amazing because if Blood Claw gives a signal, all of his relatives within a 5-kilometer radius will flock to help, and Hyul used this to earn more points. If he continues in the same spirit, then winning the Olympics is quite within his capabilities. Hyul had already defeated all the enemies and stood there, trying to catch his breath, estimating that this was worth 60 points. Suddenly something strange started to happen, and he couldn't understand if it was an earthquake or something else, but the earth was moving. The soil beneath his feet disappeared and was replaced by emerald crystals. Kayul already realized that it was a huge carcass, the shell of which shone like emeralds. Below him was a giant emerald turtle. He wondered where such a rare monster could have come from. Kayul realized that he was seeing this animal in person for the first time. He decided it was time to fight this giant. At the Obelisk Academy and the Tower of the Examination Committee, people were watching what was happening. Usually people run away from such a huge thing, because this turtle provides many options for interaction between students and is the rarest monster of the training ground. Even a genius like Shin Hyul couldn't handle her alone. The emerald turtle is a famous 4th-rank C-class reptile monster. She has incredibly high defense stats and is the natural enemy of all wizards. The turtle screamed loudly, stuck out its tongue, and rushed towards the guy. For killing such a monster, you get a huge amount of points. Hyul skillfully dodged the turtle, jumping to the side. Suddenly, the monster began to wave its long tail. Hyul reacted instantly and put up a magical barrier. However, the monster's blow was so strong that the barrier cracked. The woman who was watching the fight noticed that he was using the barrier as a support platform, but it couldn't hold up, because the emerald turtle is an opponent that is too much for even many 6-circle mages. Hyul jumped back several times and cast the flame volcano spell. After that, he jumped to the side, wondering if the attack would work. But the turtle stood firm, uninjured, and screamed furiously. Hyul realized that it would be extremely difficult to defeat such a monster even with the 5th circle and began to run away. He couldn't understand if the monster was so fast because of the mana in its body. Running further and further, Hyul came up with a brilliant plan and decided to try it. He sat down on the ground and began to cast a spell, strengthening his leg. When the turtle tried to attack, the boy jumped aside. The force of her head's blow is capable of shattering a century-old tree in an instant, and if you miss even one such blow, there won't be even a trace left. However, simple errands would not bring victory, so it was necessary to fight. When the turtle attacked again, he used the magic barrier again. He noted that the monster's power was truly enormous. Realizing that he had underestimated the enemy and would not be able to block the next attack, he used resonance magic. Such a face-to-face confrontation will disable the monster for a period of time while it recovers its strength. After waiting for the right moment, the guy immediately used wind magic. He remembered reading a picture book as a child that said the emerald tortoise had weak ligaments for the speed it could achieve. So immediately after the attack, she loses mobility to relieve the strain on the ligaments. And now was that very moment. It was a chance to win, and he used the Ice Spear spell. Everyone watching the battle was in complete shock. Hyul just activated the interaction and struck the turtle. She screamed and blue blood gushed from her mouth. The monster fell on its back, splitting its emerald shell, and a huge hole gaped in its stomach. Tired Kayul was breathing heavily and was glad that he had managed to win. They announced that he would receive 10,000 points. Inhyuk sat in his room in front of a huge screen and watched his son fight. Although the emerald turtle is particularly vulnerable to ice, the boy managed to overcome it with a 3rd circle spell, which seemed incredible. Seokyun apologized and admitted that he himself did not understand anything. Apparently so, but the monster must have natural resistance, and the ability to obtain food is an important condition for the survival test, and the guy learned this instantly. Inhyuk said that he didn't raise his son to be a weakling. Seokyun asked if he could ask one question. Why is Hyul acting so brazenly? If Jihan or Siya sees the broadcast, it will be considered a challenge. Inhyuk responded that in the past, Due to his limited abilities, his son dropped out of the race for the position of head of the family. As a result, his position in the family sank below the baseboard. But now everything has changed. Hyul had somehow gained unprecedented power, and it was impossible to deny his progress in magic. A few months before the Olympics, he asked for protection from the threat of his brothers and sisters. Therefore, Hyul can afford to stand out and do extraordinary things. This way, he will attract public attention, strengthen his position, and quickly increase his power. This is necessary so that after the end of the protection period, neither Jihan nor Sia pose a threat to him. Meanwhile, the guy was frying turtle meat over the fire and seasoning it. On the first day of testing, fights are prohibited between 11 o'clock in the evening and 1 o'clock in the morning. The boy knew it was for safety reasons, but he felt that by making things easier for the students in this way, contrary to the original rules, they would learn little. Previously, the training of mages in some countries was quite brutal, so this change was necessary. This time, they allowed him to take his magical equipment with him, which meant that Hyul could get rid of his fatigue with the help of the teacher's robe. Hyul decided that the meat wasn't so bad and had a bite. After eating a few pieces, the guy was glad that he was full. Suddenly, he heard a noise from the side and turned around. Adela and Sushin stood there, no less surprised than he was. When they all sat around the fire, Hyul asked how it happened that they were wandering through the forest together. Adela said they bumped into each other right before the break and had a little argument, and Ji said the girl brutally hit him. Hyul suggested that after the battle ended, Suchin simply crawled towards the enchanting aroma of food, and the guy confirmed that this was exactly what happened. He smelled this divine scent and asked Hyul if he would treat them. Hyul said that it was his food, but Adela and Suchin reminded him that there had never been a concept of yours and mine between them. Hyul agreed after all, since he would have thrown away the excess anyway. Suchin took a huge piece of meat and noted how delicious it smelled, and Adela also ate and thanked him for the treat. Together they ate with appetite and understood how delicious the dish was, and Hyul felt like a chef. Adela asked if this was honey bear meat. The honey bear is a bear-like monster that lives in the forest and whose meat tastes delicious when cooked. Adela heard that this was not true because only 2 local monsters had meat suitable for food. These are the honey bear and the emerald turtle, while others are either poisonous or tasteless, so they are not eaten. Then she suspected that the guy might have killed the emerald turtle. Hyul replied that this was exactly what happened, and he had done it during the day in the west. Sushin was shocked because he only caught a glimpse of the turtle and did not believe that the guy managed to kill it. Hyul told Sushan that he shouldn't open his mouth while he was eating, and even though he knew this, he still thought his friend was really cool. Adela said that she had never heard of a wizard below the 5th circle of magic being able to defeat the emerald turtle. Hyul wanted to say something, but suddenly began to cast Flame Volcano. A high red hurricane formed around him. Adela immediately realized that this was 3rd circle magic. She didn't believe that he could modify her to the power of the 6th circle because it seemed impossible. Hyul said nothing and simply stopped casting his spell. He thought it was still the 3rd circle, just enhanced by the teacher's technique. Ji asked how the guy won. Did he really hit the turtle in the head? But he replied that he simply pierced its shell. Suchin didn't believe it, but Hyul insisted that it was true. Surely the recording taken by the Academy's drones has been preserved and can be viewed after the tests are completed. Although Hyul assumed that the guys would see her first. After all, tomorrow they will fight honestly and fairly. Ji shouted that he would win, and Adela wished him luck. She added that she also had something she wanted to show him. At dawn, the 2nd day of testing began. There were 2 hours left before the survival area radius would shrink, and there were only 4 left in the game. Everyone was wondering who would emerge victorious in this fight. Kyle was walking through the forest and suddenly heard some rustling. He turned around and used wind spear magic. All the spears flew in one direction where a ball of smoke formed. Some guy said that this is not just a rumor, but a real supernova. His classmate stood on the shield above Kayul. He immediately landed and tried to hit the guy with his huge fist. Hyul noted how fast his opponent was, and when he kicked him, he dodged, falling to the ground. This guy, the magical wind cutter, only created the appearance of danger, but the real threat came from his close combat, and his roundhouse kick missed the target by a millimeter. The guy told Kayul that he was unlucky to run into him. It was a melee specializing wizard, Ji Sangwok, but Hyul apologized and said he thought he was lucky. In the past, Sangwok easily defeated one guy. The girls whispered that he was handsome, and that body enchantment was a really powerful thing. Among second years, he was among the top in 2 martial arts. He was also an expert in body enchantment, and he was clearly not someone that interaction could help against. Then Hyul also decided to use the combat skills from the body enchantment. Sangwok noticed the frequent direct confrontation and said it was cool. The committee announced that it seemed that both students had chosen the combat magic of body enchantment. In this fight, Sangwok was definitely the favorite. the man asked. Among the second years, his combat skills were undoubtedly the best, as he had won the junior national competition using body enchantment. The professor said that, however, given Hyle's fight with the Emerald Turtle yesterday, his potential was immeasurable. Sanwok actively tried to hit the guy, but he dodged. Hyle wasted no time and used his demonic eyes. Now he could see the mana streams of this guy, and it was concentrated right in his fist. And then she immediately jumped to the knee. So it was going to be a kick, and Hyul used a shield. The blow to him was very heavy, but if he uses the barrier to pin the guy down, then everything will work out. Immediately, the defense shattered into pieces, and Sanvok flew back. The guy was surprised when he saw that Hyul had completely destroyed his own barrier. He had never seen such magic before and thought that it seemed like the genius magician had really returned. Sanwok began to worry because these were clearly not just simple rumors. But now things were getting much more interesting, although Sanvok had his own pride, and he had no intention of losing in close combat. Kayul waited for the moment, understood that this was his chance, and gathered mana in his fist. He swung and hit the guy, but he defended himself by crossing both arms. The commission was shocked because the guy was able to block the blow. After that, Sanwok swung his leg and Hyul jumped back. Kyle was shocked that the enemy managed to react, because his combat sense was quite good, but he lacked common sense. If he had disguised the flame throw in a power attack, even using the barrier, both hands would have received serious damage at the last moment. Kyle approached the enemy with great speed, and the enemy noticed his speed. Sanwok crossed his arms again and got into a fighting stance. Kyle asked if he was still defending himself in this way. After that, he launched a magical attack because the armpit was open. Sanwok thought that the enchantment of the guy's hands was just a feint, since he originally wanted to hit with his knee. He didn't understand when he managed to enchant his legs. Sanwok touched his side and realized that he thought his rib was broken. But he was a real fighter, and he could endure such pain using only willpower. He got into a fighting stance and moved to attack, because attack is everything for a fighter. Hyul said that if he relied too much on his strength, his body would quickly break down. Sanwok ignored these words and jumped up to deliver a kick. Kayul managed to jump back and asked if the guy had overexerted himself. Sanwok only had time to put his foot on the ground when a fist was already flying towards him. Kayul hit his enemy's chin with all his might with his knuckles. He flew to the side and hit his back painfully. Now he lay unconscious, and Kayul stood and stretched his arm. At one point, the boy concentrated mana in his lower jaw to reduce the damage. Kayul wiped his sweat with his t-shirt and realized that he knew everything, because the guy's fighting sense was incredible. He not only had offensive power, but also defense, and Sanwok was clearly a tough opponent. As night approached, the barrier that marked the area for classes narrowed. Hyul looked at the watch on his hand and realized that there were only 3 survivors left. So he had only 2 enemies. And then Adela came out of the dark bushes and said that now was a great time for battle. The combat survival test has come to an end, and there are only 2 people left among the last survivors. Adela and Hyul stood opposite each other and looked confidently into each other's eyes. Sia couldn't believe it because the broadcast clearly showed that her brother was in the final of the challenge. They couldn't even lay a finger on him, and soon he would stop obeying them altogether. At this rate, the brother would once again become the heir, and that was unacceptable. When she asked Jihan's opinion, he simply remained silent. She turned to him again, believing that he should answer, since Hyul had managed to defeat the Emerald Turtle. She wondered how anyone could beat her at his level, especially on live television, which their father was probably watching. Just like the rest of the family, Jihan asked his sister to calm down. The girl screamed, not understanding how one could remain calm in such a situation. She wanted to say something else, but stopped when she saw her brother's gaze. He said he wouldn't repeat it twice. Seiya feigned a submission and asked for forgiveness, promising to remain silent and begging not to punish her. Jihan walked up to her, stroked her head, and asked what she was talking about. He saw no reason to punish her. After all, they were brother and sister. Seiya sank to the floor and thanked him, and Jihan noted that their brother was very cunning and always seized on good opportunities. Despite the family ties, if he continues to stir up trouble, Jihan will not let it go. A powerful explosion was heard in the forest. Adela used a smart light bullet, deciding that she could no longer be caught off guard, since she had watched his fights tens of thousands of times. In that fight, he even used the sun, but now it was night. The moon illuminated everything with its soft light, and today everything was supposed to be different. The girl decided that she would not give him the slightest chance to counterattack. Hyul put his hands forward, creating a small wind hurricane directed at the girl. Numerous arrows immediately flew at him, and the guy tried to dodge. One of them grazed his shoulder, and he realized how dangerous the fire from the moon bullets was. The number of magic projectiles was much greater than in the transfer exams. It was impossible to dodge them all at once, and the girl knew that he was only capable of single weak techniques and was vulnerable to dense magical fire. She understood that this was his weak point, because in terms of speed and efficiency, she surpassed him in everything. Several magic circles appeared in front of her, and she cast an explosion spell. Kyle dodged with difficulty and, breathing heavily, remained alive. He managed to erect a barrier and remained unharmed, saying that she could think whatever she wanted. She tried to gain the upper hand through the superiority of the magic circle, which was the result of her analysis of his fights. Of course, such an intense magical bombardment was not within the power of everyone, which was expected from a representative of the Divine Guardian clan. That was exactly it, and he wondered since when she had mastered the fourth circle. Meanwhile, he began to conjure ice needles behind her back. Adela stopped the attack, saying that she knew he would notice. Hyel immediately enveloped his attack spell in smoke. The girl explained that she had mastered the fourth circle about 4 days ago, and that was not all. An ice arrow shot through the night sky and almost reached the girl. But Adela said that such tricks would no longer fool her. As the arrow approached, she destroyed it with her magic. Hyul immediately recognized the spell and realized that she not only had the fourth circle, but also heart guidance, which was excessive. Heart guidance was the secret magic of the noble French steward family. It was a special detection magic similar to the red eyes of Kim Kun-yoon, the lord of the blue magic tower. The current Adela combined the strengths of divine guardian magic such as range, power, and variability with the signature detection magic of steward, making her an incredibly dangerous opponent. She was like a monster in human form. The guy had to give it his all. Adela decided that she would no longer give the enemy any favors. She remembered the magic he used to defeat the Emerald Turtle and wanted to see her again. At that very moment, several arrows flew towards Kayul. The guy replied that he was just about to show his strength. His eyes flashed as he activated his demon eye and saw that Adela's moonlight bullet contained moon attribute mana of 27.74. The darkness attribute mana was 71.33, while the water attribute mana was less than 1 point, and its activation required the calculation of 12 magic formulas at the same time. It also involved linking the graphs of Ferdania's magical equations, and the guy used interaction magic. Adela was amazed that her bullet had veered off course just before it hit its target, and couldn't figure out what trick he had used. Hyel asked her how she thought he had done it, and doubted that even her heart sight would have helped him figure it out. At this time, in the estate of the House of Magicians, a man approached Inhyuk. He had a glass of wine in his hand, and he didn't understand what kind of magic his brother had, and what kind of spell could change the structure of magic projectiles in such an unprecedented way. This man was the head of the Divine Guardian House, Wee Sang-chol. Inhyuk replied that he didn't understand either, and the man asked if his son had told him anything. Inhyuk replied that nothing, and Sang-chol said that it was unexpected for a guy to hide something from him. The man said that over the past year he had grown into a real impudent person. Now he has more secrets than revelations. Sang-chol noted that it was understandable since Hyul had changed a lot in a year away from home. Inhyuk noted that this was largely true, and Sang-chol said that it was true what they say. A man only grows up when he leaves his father's house. He admitted that during the transfer exams he thought that Kayul was just lucky. He feels a little ashamed to say this in front of Inhyuk because at the time he thought that the guy's glimmer of fame was fleeting. Inhyuk replied that it was okay, he understood everything, because this child was incompatible with artificial intelligence. In the fight where he defeated Adela, it was clearly not due to superior skill, but rather strategy and technical execution. People began to analyze information about the guy and immediately exposed his weaknesses, after which they predicted his imminent defeat. This was especially obvious given Adela's analytical abilities. Sang-chol said that his daughter's analytical skills were excellent, but it seemed that he had greatly underestimated this young man. The man admitted to Inhyuk that he was even grateful to Hyul. When his daughter lost her purpose in life, her eyes were expressionless for the first time. Now they shone brighter than ever. He was genuinely happy that Hyul had returned, because even Jisoo now had his motivation back. Inhyuk, looking at the screen with his son's image, agreed with this. Such actions were truly worth thanking. The voice announced that the combat survival test was over, and the survivors must stop fighting immediately. Kyle was very surprised, but stopped fighting. When the smoke cleared, he saw Adela's face, wiping sweat from her forehead. The guy noted that if he had a little more time, he would certainly have won. Adela replied that this would never have happened, because she had the advantage. Suddenly the professor appeared and said that they had to stop, because they had to return to the tower. The next day, Adela tried to prove to the guy that she would have won their fight yesterday. Kyle replied that there was no point in dreaming, because victory would have been his, as always. The girl said that she began to understand which way her magic was deviating, and she would have figured him out in 5 minutes. Hyul asked if that was really the case because in 5 minutes her brain would boil and she would lose. Jisoo-chan silently watched their conversation. He said that if they were going to discuss this all evening, they should go into another room because he didn't need them fighting. They both told him at the same time to shut up because he was Mr. 26, out. G started crying because it was his room and he called them to watch the fight footage, not to argue. They noticed pizza, drinks, and banana milk on the table and asked if he had bought all of this for them. The guy replied that yes, he tried very hard for them, but in the end, they made a scene. Hyul said that he was blocking the view as always and decided to quickly settle everything, because they needed to review everything from the very beginning. The recording lasted 14 hours, and it was a very long time, but they watched everything. Jisoo-chan was already in a sleepy state and was raving about monsters and tests. These words made Adela laugh, and Hyul asked why she was laughing. Adela covered her friend and said she was just having fun. It was hard to watch all 14 hours of footage, and she thought the guy would give up halfway through. Hyul noted that although Suchin cried that he couldn't handle anything, but he always tries his best. Adela smiled and said that he had good friends. Hyul replied that they were even too good. In his opinion, they were simply magnificent. Suddenly, Adela apologized and her eyes became sad. Hyul didn't understand why he heard such words from her. The girl admitted that she pretended for a whole year that they were strangers and continued to keep her distance. Now she realized how wrong she had been and she was very sorry. Hyul didn't understand what there was to apologize for since he himself had rejected her attempts at communication. He said that he himself chose to keep his distance, and to be honest, he tried to close himself off even from Suchan. Suchin immediately woke up from these words, not believing what he heard, and asked if it was true. Hyul said that now he is not the same as he was a year ago because he has gained new strength. And not only strength, but also new comrades, and I would like to show them both something. The guy put his hands forward and began to cast a spell, after which a sphere appeared between them. G and Adela watched this and couldn't believe it, because now he had moonlight bullets in his hands. Hyul says that this is exactly what his magic is. Jai realizes that this means that his modified magic is capable of interfering with the very formula of the enemy's magic spells. Hyul claims that this is exactly the case, and adds that he also received eyes that can see the structures of magical formulas. Adela is very surprised to hear about the formulas, and realizes that this is why he was able to decipher her family charms. Hyul explains that it is usually extremely difficult to change the spells of a secret school, but his personal development was the result of long-term analysis. He notes that for such an intervention to occur, it is necessary to see the original spell up close at least several times. The magic he used to defeat the turtle back then was also modified, as he had carefully examined the monster's shell and applied a spell that reduced its durability. In fact, the monster's shield had a magical structure, and Adela says she now understands how it was able to change the trajectory of her magical projectiles. It turns out that in order to interfere with the structure of the enemy's spells, he needs to fully understand their formula. So at the first meeting he could not do anything, because he simply did not understand how. Hyul replies that everything is exactly like that, and notes that the girl quickly grasps the essence. In this match, he focused solely on his moonlight bullets and was able to calculate their formula, but if he had used other spells, it would have been more difficult for the girl. Little did she know that using only moonlight bullets would prove to be a fatal mistake on her part. She asked if this magic had any weaknesses, and Hyul replied that calculating mana and attributes was quite complicated. Therefore, he can only interfere with those spells that he has seen up close. And in a real fight, this may not be possible, and in most cases, the trajectory will only change slightly. Adela wondered if it was possible to turn the magic projectile 180 degrees and send it back to the enemy. Hyul said that there would definitely not be enough time for something like that in battle, and Adela added that mirroring spells would be cool. Suchin thinks that Hyul's charms are already too cheating. Hyul should have listened to him when he asked why he was revealing and discussing his secret weapon with Adela. Hyul asked if he didn't understand, and Adela also asked why he didn't understand, and G didn't understand what they were talking about. Adela and Hyul simultaneously said one word: Olympics. Hyul said that Adela and Suchan will perform with him because they have to help him. Suchan first burst into tears from the touchingness of these words, and then stopped. He said that Adela was still okay, but he was not strong enough for such a competition. The selection is conducted among second and third year students, and therefore it will be difficult to get a place in the academy. Hyul told him not to worry because he would get his participation one way or another. Adela noted that there will be many obstacles, but Hyul's interaction is their main trump card. If it is acceptable to use it in a match, then a team fight where they have to protect their magic stone while destroying enemy cannons will be within their power. Or a match where you have to steal a flag from the enemy base while defending your own would also be a winning option. Hyel said that they have team or siege battles in their pocket, not counting everything else. Adela asked if he had any other cards. Kyle smiled slyly and said that, of course, he had them. A couple of hours later, he found himself in his room in a cloak, leafing through a book. He realized that everything was ready and it was time to begin, after which he began to cast a spell and touch the Book of Mimir. At this time, the girl in the room was lying on the sofa and reading a book, when suddenly a guy appeared and she greeted him. Mimir said that he came later than she expected, and she just hoped he wouldn't say that he didn't take first place. Hyel boasted that, of course, he took it, because the points for defeating the Emerald Turtle decided everything. He asked if she remembered saying that they were going to win a gold medal in one of the important competitions. Mimir replied that of course she remembered and asked if he was talking about the Olympics, to which Hyel confirmed and said that he had discussed it with friends and mentioned interaction. Mimir was surprised and asked if he hadn't said that they needed to be fully prepared before telling their friends, since everything happened too quickly. Kyle replied that everything happened just in time. He noted that he had only recently mastered the interaction to perfection. Mimir screamed with joy and said that the guy was simply amazing. Hyel asked her to look for destruction-level books for him. He explained that it was time to move on to the third magical circle of destruction. When Hyel was in his room, he received a call. He realized that it was the Lord of the Tower and answered the challenge. Cannon said that he saw the broadcast and was shocked because the guy single-handedly defeated the Emerald Turtle, and it was amazing. He added that fighting on equal terms with Adela, who already had the fourth circle, and breaking through the turtle shell was incredible. Cannon noted that he saw the girl's moonlight bullets change trajectory at the last moment. At first he thought that Hyel was using some kind of mana distortion field, but he realized that was not the case. Hyel said that he sincerely apologizes, but he cannot reveal the secrets of his magic yet. Cannon replied that he got too carried away and asked for forgiveness, since the guy doesn't have to answer. He acknowledged that the magician had a right to his secrets. He noted that Hyel's magic was incredibly interesting, and expressed hope that he would be able to figure it out himself. He then admitted that he called Hyel because of the elemental stones he asked about. Hyel asked if there was good news or bad news. Cannon came to the right room and said that the news was good, because now everything was ready and it was possible to raise the stakes. Kyle was very surprised and asked if his people were tired of working all this time. Cannon replied that not at all, because everyone here is a creator to the core, and it is impossible to tear them away from the elemental stones. As expected, they were ready to work hard. Cannon said that in general the guy doesn't have to worry, since he will definitely get his artifact. Kyle thanked him and added that he was looking forward to it, after which the man was about to say goodbye and hang up. But Kyle stopped him, saying that he had one more request. Cannon asked if there was any talk of compensation for the incident with Langsmith. Hyel replied that this was not entirely true and depended on how the Lord of the Magic Tower perceived it. Canyon said that it sounded intriguing, and he was curious about what the guy would suggest this time, so he listened carefully. Hyel said that before this year's Olympics, he would like to ask the creator of the artifacts from the Blue Magic Tower to join the national team's engineering team. Mimir, hearing that Hyel needed to fight the owner of the fifth magic circle, was in complete shock. Hyel explained that these were the conditions of the Lord of the Blue Magic Tower. He wondered if he was taking this too lightly. Cannon had previously asked him if he wanted his man to officially become a developer for the Olympics, and having heard a positive answer, he immediately refused. Kyle thought that everything was exactly as he expected, because it was simply not beneficial for the man. Cannon explained that in any other case he would have said the same thing, but if Hyel defeats the fifth circle mage one-on-one, he will reconsider his decision. Kyle didn't hesitate for a second and immediately agreed. Cannon asked if he knew that among the foreign participants in the Olympics this year, there will be 2 fifth circle magicians. He noted that he had no doubts about the guy's skills, but introducing his own man would require colossal expenses, and he wouldn't go for it just like that. Kyle first had to prove that he was capable of winning a gold medal. Mimir asked what he was going to do, since in his current state it was almost impossible to defeat the fifth circle mages. Kyle replied that this was for now and asked for a 10-day delay. Mimir asked if he was going to take measures and prepare for battle during this time. Hyel said he had a couple of ideas for preparation, but it would be difficult to perfect them in 10 days. He noted that it was really worth taking such measures for the sake of the engineer from the Blue Magic Tower, because otherwise everything would lose its meaning. In the country, only the masters of the Blue Magic Tower can gain access to customizing artifacts for the Olympics. Mimir guessed that this place must be truly amazing. She noted that artifacts made by ordinary craftsmen and the products of the masters of the Blue Magic Tower differ by at least 10%. Moreover, nowadays, only the masters of the Blue Magic Tower are able to perform the attunement of elemental monastones. Thus, the difference in artifact settings can have a decisive impact on winning competitions, and their support will clearly not be superfluous. They came to the conclusion that it was imperative to involve these masters, and Mimir asked when he planned to begin the third stage of the test. Hyul said that he was going to first study all the books that the girl had prepared for him. Mimir was surprised by this and noted that this was a good attitude. She added that when he began the third test, he should convey her greetings and praise for his efforts. Kayul was very surprised and asked if she knew anyone there, but the girl replied that it was a secret. She explained that if she said it now, it wouldn't be as interesting. The rich hall welcomed everyone who came to the celebration of the subsidiary company of the House of Magicians and expressed hope that the guests would have a good time. Someone noticed that, as expected, the eldest son of the company's head, the president of the branch, was the one giving the floor. The man said he considered this to be actual confirmation that he had been chosen as the next head of the family, but Jihan responded that he was being flattered and was simply lucky. He added that everything he has is thanks to his friends. Someone said that the House of Mages definitely has a bright future. The interlocutor agreed, adding that even the youngest son of the family distinguished himself. Jihan got angry and looked at the one who said this. The man asked if everyone had seen the broadcast where the young man defeated the Emerald Turtle on his own. He added that once you are called a genius, you will remain a genius forever. Someone asked if anyone remembered his fight with Adela Steward, who was already a fourth circle mage. Moreover, the guy encountered the Divine Guardian clan's secret technique of the moon attribute and managed to withstand it, which is truly incredible. After this, one would not dare call him unsuitable because, hiding their faces, people might think that this was a real fight between adult magicians. Everyone at the event was actively discussing Kayul. Someone said they were looking forward to his participation in the upcoming Olympics. Surely the head of the family is also impressed by Hyul's performance. Jihan stood in a crowded room, but he felt lonely because everyone was talking about his younger brother. Someone said that he personally believes that the position of heir will be taken by the younger, talented brother. Jihan remembered how in the past he looked at his brother with envy because everyone only talked about him. He quickly learned to cast spells, which irritated him the most, and Jihan hated him, deciding to get rid of him one day. Someone asked Jihan how he was doing, but he was no longer there. The man left, leaving only a broken glass of wine on the floor. Jihan went outside, took a deep breath of fresh air, and straightened his tie. He thought that all this was very bad because this boy was bothering him. This means that he must die in the near future. Hyul was sitting in the library and reading a book. After a couple of hours, the mountain of books he had read grew larger and larger. He closed the last one and said everything was fine. Mimir asked if he had finished reading already, and the boy replied that if that was all the literature, then he thought he had finished. Mimir said that it turns out that he has studied all the basics concerning destruction, but did he understand them? Kayul admitted that he didn't really understand anything, but at least now he has an idea about this circle. He figured out how it worked a little, and Mimir said it was okay that he couldn't figure it out right away. After all, if you tell a person who has never had wings how to use them to fly, it's unlikely that he will understand everything. Until a guy encounters destruction directly, there is no way he can achieve it. Mimir showed him the drawing, and the boy said it was so-so, but he seemed to understand what she was trying to convey. Mimir was upset because it was her masterpiece. Hyul knew that he really had to face destruction, which meant he had no choice but to enter the third page of trials. Mimir said that everything was correct, and the boy would receive all the answers on the third page of the tests. Hyul asked if this was the man she had asked to convey her greetings to, and who would teach destruction. The girl replied that if he was so interested, he should go and ask himself, since he had already finished reading the books. Hyul asked her to tell him at least something, but she couldn't talk about the third page of tests. Mimir said there were no restrictions, and reminded that they had given each other their word. Kyle found himself in his room and could not understand what kind of promise she had made, that she would not even say an extra word about the test. The guy took the book and began to cast a spell to get into space. He thought that it would be better to find out the reason directly on the third page of the tests. A tree, branches, leaves, and a portal appeared underneath him. The guy hoped that it would become clearer to him and closed his eyes. And when he opened them, he was in complete shock, because he was surrounded only by forest. And not a simple one, but with disproportionately tall trees all around, and he didn't know where such trees could be found. The boy thought that he would be transported to another dimension, like the previous times, but here no one met him. Even the teacher's voice was not heard. Hyul walked forward and wondered if this entire area was really a page of trials. The forest was so vast that it eventually reached the edge of the cliff. The boy was delighted because the teacher's magic surpassed all boundaries of his imagination. No matter how long he walked, there was no end in sight. Hyul approached the clear lake and wondered if this place itself could be a test. Suddenly he heard a strange sound and everything around him shook. At first he thought it was an earthquake, but then he decided it was something else, as if something unknown was looking at him. Hyul turned his head to the side and met the gaze of a huge red dragon. There were sharp scales on his back, and horns and sharp claws on his paws. Hyul looked at him and did not understand anything. This monster was already so close, but the guy didn't even notice its approach. When the monster roared, the boy fell into the water. Hyul immediately noticed the monster's vertical pupil, characteristic of reptiles. Its armored scales resembled those of a crocodile. The claws and fangs were razor sharp, and there was no doubt that this was a beyond A-rank, calamity-level Drake. Hyul thought these creatures were imaginary, but now he realized that the conditions of the test were to defeat him. The guy started to get really worried. Sweat was pouring off his face because it seemed impossible and he couldn't even move. The slightest breath from this creature made the mana in the air tremble, and it was on a completely different level compared to the monsters the boy had encountered before. In Drake's eyes, Hyul was nothing more than a sweet mana berry, just prey, and he doubted he could even escape from him. And then he realized that this was impossible. Even with all the speed he had developed during training, he couldn't outrun Drake. And the biggest problem was that his body refused to move. If the monster attacks, it will all be over. Hyul was very surprised to notice that the monster was not approaching. He wondered if there was something stopping him. Suddenly, the boy heard someone's voice saying that he was impressed by all of this. Someone's elegant feet stepped on the water and walked towards him. The girl said that even in the face of a monster beyond category, Hyul does not give up, and his will is like steel. Despite the hopeless situation, he keeps himself in hand and does not panic. She announced that the test had been passed and the boy could now move. Hyul, very surprised, asked her who she was. The girl introduced herself. Her name was Elena L. Greenwood. She was known as an elder, a great sorceress, and an old friend of Ray. Hyul couldn't believe that there was a dryad standing next to him. The girl said that perhaps it was time to drive the monster away now. Although blinded by desire, the monster did not dare to enter her abode, and she appreciated it. In recognition of his patience, and in particular for the destruction of her garden, she forgave him. So the monster had to return to his forest in peace, preserving the remnants of the dignity of a noble creature. Elena gathered the magic ball in her hands and, blowing it out, sent a beam of magic that passed through the entire forest. Hyul realized that the forest itself responded to the girl's words, as if confirming that she was its mistress. Elena continued to address the monster, saying that if he was unable to understand her words, then today he would turn into nothing and be destroyed. Suddenly, the previously smooth beam became sharp and passed around the monster's body, cutting it. Hyul immediately noticed that Drake's body was covered with countless wounds. There was no sound, only visible aftermath, as if something had riddled Drake with great speed. Hyul looked at the girl in surprise, not understanding what she had done. The monster could barely stand on its feet, and fresh wounds were visible on its body. Elena said that it was just a warning, and now he had to leave. Finally, the monster obeyed, turned around, and went into his forest. Hyul watched him and saw that his wounds immediately disappeared. It was a terrifying monster of the highest class, and the girl calmly stood up to it, which seemed incredible. Elena turned to the guy and asked if he was okay, to which he replied that he was, thanks to her. The girl noticed that he was probably a little shocked. She invited him to come with her, calling him her successor, and extended her hand. Together they came to a huge tree, in the trunk of which a door was visible. Elena placed herbal tea in front of the guest, which Ray loved very much. She explained that this tea would make him feel much calmer. Hyul drank it and felt something strange. He didn't understand what this miracle was, but his thoughts cleared up in an instant. Elena happily watched as the guy drank her tea. The girl said that she was very glad that he liked him. She asked if he liked it. Hyul replied that yes, it was the most delicious tea he had ever tasted. The guy admitted that he was a little ashamed for showing his unsightly side. Elena said there was nothing to be ashamed of. The fact that he didn't give in to Drake was impressive enough. Hyul realized that it was indeed Drake, and he couldn't even move then. Although he is the master of the forest, he usually does not enter Elena's territory. But this time, it seemed to be difficult for him to resist. Hyul didn't understand what exactly, and the girl explained that the pure concentrated mana that he carries within himself is a real delicacy for Drake. He probably found the guy incredibly appetizing, and hunger even displaced his fear of Elena. The girl asked if he had any more questions. Hyul asked if all this was really inside Adred, since the world here was so real that it lost the feeling of being in a book. The walk from the meeting place with Drake to Lady Elena's house took them at least 15 minutes, and the forest turned out to be huge, with a scale incomparable to the previous page of tests. The guy couldn't understand where exactly he was and what kind of place this was. Elena explained that this space extends from page 214 to page 232 of the book, being the third page of Trials. Hayol couldn't believe it and asked himself if that Drake was not real, but created with the help of magic. Elena replied that she didn't know, and that he wasn't entirely real, but not entirely fake either. Kayol was surprised how to understand this, but the girl said that this space was created based on the memories of the past. They were now inside Adrid, which replicated the greenwood forest that once existed in reality. It can be called a copy of the real world because it is neither completely real nor fake. Hayol realized that the creators took the world of the past and rewrote it. He was placed in Adrid's book, but he couldn't understand how that was even possible. Elena said that she doesn't know the details, and that the only one who understands this magic is Ray himself, the heir of his teacher. The boy remembered the teacher's words that one day he would reach Ray's level and understand everything. Hayol asked why the teacher created this space then, and Elena answered that it was to transmit a certain magic to him. It was the magic of the third circle of the Weitner style. It was necessary for the acquisition of destruction, representing the eye that could see the nature of magic, the divine eye.